Sophie, accompanied by her elder daughter, walked through the supermarket, tossing items into the cart. She still couldn't believe she had finally managed to get out of the house. Today marked her younger daughter's one-month milestone. To help prepare a meal for the visiting relatives, Sophie's mother, Tricia, had come over. She assisted with the cooking and was now watching over the little one. "Hello, Dana," came an unfamiliar voice from behind. "Hello, Marcia," Dana replied as she turned around, blushing slightly and glancing at Sophie. "If I understand correctly, you're Dana's mom." "I'm Sarah Strong's mother. Our kids are in the same class." "Nice to meet you, Sophie." Her daughter had been in the first grade for 3 months now, but Sophie had never once been to the school. She had spent a month and a half in the hospital before giving birth, and then it took a while before she and the baby were discharged. As a result, it was Dana's father who took her to and from school, attended meetings, and took care of everything. "I heard you recently had a baby." "A girl?" the woman asked, sighing heavily. "I bet your husband was hoping for a boy." Sophie's smile vanished instantly. "Maybe he did, but he's happy with a daughter too. We're celebrating today. Our Faith is 1 month old. We're expecting guests, so Dana and I need to hurry." Taking her daughter by the hand, Sophie bid farewell to her new acquaintance and headed toward the checkout. As soon as they got home, they washed their hands and, while the baby slept soundly in her crib, they began helping Tricia set the table. Sophie's husband arrived an hour before the guests were due. Just then, Faith woke up. While Rick was washing his hands, someone called him. Dana grabbed the phone and brought it to her father, but as soon as they heard the conversation, they realized Sophie had forgotten to turn off the baby monitor in the bedroom after taking the baby downstairs. "I told you not to call me after 5, didn't I? How many times do I have to say the same thing?" Rick's voice made Sophie tense. Dana wanted to leave the kitchen and warn her father to turn off the speakerphone, but Tricia held her back. "Don't argue, I won't keep you long. I just saw your wife and Dana at the store about half an hour ago." A heavy sigh was heard over the phone. "So what? I hope you had the sense not to approach them. We just met. You're celebrating today. Your daughter is 1 month old. And I've missed a period." The last word Sarah Strong's mother uttered with a breathy voice. Instead of placing the chicken in the oven, Tricia carelessly tossed it into the sink. She sat down on a chair, covering her mouth with her hand, and stared at Sophie's pale face. If it weren't for the baby Sophie was nursing, she probably would have fainted. "Are you happy?" Rick said nothing in response. Dana couldn't take it anymore. She opened the door, walked into the room, and turned off the baby monitor. Within a few minutes, she and her father were back in the kitchen. "So, I'm here trying my best, cooking dinner, expecting guests, and my son-in-law couldn't care less. His mind is occupied with something entirely different. I mean, really. His lover is Mr. Period. I don't even know what to do, congratulate you or offer condolences." Tricia looked at Rick, waiting for an answer. "Sophie, why are you silent? He cheated on you. While you were in the hospital, he wasn't wasting any time." Tricia glanced at the wall clock, then back at Rick. She clutched her temples, shook her head, and started to cry. "What a scoundrel. Tricia, don't make things worse. Sophie shouldn't get stressed, or she'll lose her milk," Rick said through gritted teeth. "So I take it the celebration is cancelled." Tricia opened the fridge, took out the salad, and dumped it in the trash. The chicken, potatoes, and fresh vegetables followed. She regretted the effort she had put into preparing the meal, but the thought of leaving a fridge full of food for her son-in-law made her sick. Ignoring his mother-in-law, Rick picked up his daughter and turned to Sophie again. "Can we talk?" "About what?" "I heard everything I needed to. I'm going to pack our things, and Dana, Faith, and I will go to my mom's. I don't want to stay with you in the same apartment, and I won't." Sophie left the kitchen and took out a suitcase. She tried not to look at her husband. She was trembling with fear at the thought of leaving Rick, but she continued to pack. If she stayed, she would lose all self-respect. "Dana, pack your things, we're leaving," she whispered. My God! How did they end up here? Her heart alternated between stopping and racing wildly. She glanced sideways at Rick, realizing that he was no longer her husband, but a complete stranger. "I don't want to live at Grandma's, can I stay with Dad?" Dana said. Sophie turned pale. Trisha held her breath, hoping this was just an impulsive outburst. "Who's going to do your homework with you? Take you to and from school? Feed you and braid your hair?" Trisha tried to persuade her to come along. "Stay, Dana. If your mom leaves now, we'll find someone to braid your hair. There will be no coming back for our mom." In shock, Sophie was at a loss for words. Rick had clearly planned everything out meticulously. He had already won over their daughter, fully aware that Sophie had few options. Her mother's apartment was small, and this one had been inherited from Rick's grandmother. They had renovated it together, shopped for wallpaper, all in an effort to build their family home. But now, it seemed that all their efforts were in vain. "If you don't change your mind by morning, a new lady of the house will be moving in," Rick threatened. "Step aside. You can bring her in right now for all I care. No need to upset a pregnant woman and wait until morning. Live long and happy. And you," Sophie turned to Dana. "Think it over carefully. If you decide to come back to us, know that we'll always welcome you." Pushing Rick away from the front door, Trisha wheeled the suitcase into the hallway. Sophie followed, holding her baby in her arms, and slammed the door behind them. Rick stared at the door, uncertain of what to do. Chase after Sophie? Fall to his knees and beg for forgiveness? No. It was better not to bother her right now. He remembered the cold sweat that had washed over him when Dana had dashed into the room to turn off the baby monitor. He had hoped his wife wouldn't make a scene before the guests arrived. He had planned to come up with something later. After all, he had a great opportunity to make things right. 2 months ago, they had closed several successful deals, and Rick's boss had awarded the entire team a substantial bonus. Rick had decided to use the money to buy his wife a gift, a 2-bedroom apartment, with some help from his parents. Today, they had planned to surprise Sophie with the keys, but things had taken a completely different turn. Rick called his parents, apologized, and asked them not to come over tonight. He didn't explain anything. His parents, of course, were upset, realizing something had happened, but they didn't press for details. "And why didn't you go with Grandma?" he asked Dana. His daughter sighed heavily and shrugged. Rick could see that Dana was torn. She wanted to be with her mother, but she was also hoping Sophie wouldn't leave for her sake. Dana was on the verge of tears but held back. "How will Mom take me to school? First, it's far, and second, she has faith. But here. When you can't pick me up from school, I can go to Sarah's house. Marcia is always happy to see me." Rick swallowed the lump in his throat. He didn't know how to respond, understanding that he was the one who had dragged their daughter into this mess. But he had to find a way out. "Tomorrow, we'll try to talk to Mom. Maybe we can bring her back. But if not, I'll give you the keys to the apartment. And you won't be visiting Sarah anymore." "I forbid it." Rick turned away, unable to bear the sight of his daughter's shocked face. She knew everything. If she didn't know, she suspected. He had considered Dana too young to understand, forgetting that it was the 21st century. Kids grew up faster now. "And you won't go to Marcia's anymore either?" His heart almost stopped. Rick exhaled loudly, rubbing his temples in thought. He would give anything to turn back time and never meet Marcia. Yes, he had made a mistake. Because he couldn't live like this anymore, work, home, school, with Sophie in the hospital. Yes, his actions were despicable. Marcia had been there at the right time and place. When he was too busy, she picked Dana up from school. At first, they just called each other. Then she invited him over for dinner, just a simple meal. But it became a habit. The girls became close friends, and nothing surprised them anymore. He only realized he needed to end it when he brought Sophie and the baby home from the hospital. He did talk to Marcia, explained that he loved his wife. But why did she have to call yesterday? And why did he, like an idiot, answer the call on speakerphone? No. I won't go to Marcia's anymore. Then Sarah won't be my friend anymore, and she'll convince the other girls not to be friends with me either. Dana went pale. To comfort her, Rick pulled her close to his chest. He wanted to collapse onto the bed, cover himself with a blanket, and pretend all the problems had disappeared. God, what had he done? I hope that won't happen. But if the girls listen to Sarah and don't want to be friends with you, I'll transfer you to another school. What worried him most right now was how little his threats had affected his wife. She simply packed up and left. Sophie had always been proud and strong. Why had he threatened her? Stupid. He had only made things worse. These thoughts made him want to roar, scream, and smash everything around him. If Dana hadn't been there, he might have done just that, but he didn't want to scare her. Her heart pounded as she thought about going back, taking Dana with her, explaining that she'd be better off with her mom, but going back to the place she had left in disgrace was impossible. She wouldn't set foot in that house again. She would call her daughter tomorrow and try to persuade her. It hurt to think that Dana knew Marcia, her father's mistress, so well. The idea that her daughter had covered for her father's affair tore at her heart. They left the building, barely managing to get the suitcase into the car. "Are you sure you should be driving?" her mom asked. "I'm fine. Really, I'm okay." Tricia kissed her granddaughter and hugged her tightly. She wasn't prepared for what had just happened and was ready to tear Rick to pieces and forget him forever. Scoundrel. Tomorrow he'd bring a new woman into the house. She'd braid Dana's hair. At that thought, she felt like throwing him down the stairs the next time she saw him. Sophie turned to look at her daughter, then glanced at her mother's distressed face. She shook her head, forbidding herself to dwell on the negative. So what if her husband cheated? She'd just raise her daughters on her own. It was painful, but there was nothing she could do. She tried not to dwell on the fact that Rick had failed the test of time and proved unfaithful. Right now, her bigger concern was Dana. Sophie had no intention of leaving her daughter with Rick. Let him raise Marcia's child, but Dana was off limits. With these thoughts, she started the car, carefully pulled out of the parking lot, and drove home. After putting Faith to bed, Sophie looked at her phone. Her head was filled with thoughts of her daughter. How was she? And Tricia had thrown all the food in the trash. At least there was still milk in the fridge, along with her favorite cereal. On the one hand, it was a good thing she hadn't turned off the baby monitor. If she hadn't overheard their conversation with Marcia, who knows how things might have ended. It was terrifying to think of how Rick could have manipulated Dana, swayed her to his side, and convinced her to keep quiet. It was painful to recall how he had threatened her and said things that made her sick, all without caring that her mother was right there. "Sophie, can I call you? Grandpa and I are worried. I know you went to your mom's. I won't be able to sleep until I know what happened," came a message from her mother-in-law. "Good evening, Bernadette." She didn't feel like talking to her mother-in-law, but Bernadette needed to know what her beloved son had done. Tears welled up again. "Sophie, can you explain what's going on? Rick and I are getting a divorce. Today I found out that while I was in the hospital, he had an affair with the mother of our daughter's classmate. Apparently, Rick didn't even bother to hide it. Dana has been spending time with her father's mistress. She's okay with it, which is why she decided to stay with her dad." Sophie sniffed, wiping away her tears. Tricia couldn't take it anymore and grabbed the phone from her daughter. "Good evening, Bernadette. How's that for news? Not hearing a response, she continued, "You're about to have more grandkids. Your son's mistress is Mr. Period. She called him right before you arrived and told him he's going to be a father again. Scoundrel. He had an affair behind his wife's back and dragged Dana into this mess. Tell him he can do whatever he wants, but we're not letting him have Dana." Trisha, wait. I don't understand. Everything seemed fine. Rick was preparing for the celebration. He took out a mortgage on an apartment, and we helped with the down payment. He wanted to give Sophie the keys today for the birth of their daughter. I know he put all their savings into it and asked us to contribute. He was planning a surprise for her. I just don't understand. This can't be true. Trisha smirked, her mind a whirlwind of chaotic thoughts. She was so wound up that she couldn't stop herself. We'll see who ends up with those keys. Rick told Sophie, right in front of me, that if she left today, there would be a new lady of the house in his apartment by tomorrow. So, you might want to visit your son tomorrow and meet your new daughter-in-law. But first, we need to get our granddaughter out of this mess. Silence fell on the other end of the line. Sophie felt a chill run through her body, tears welling up in her eyes once more. I still hope this is some sort of misunderstanding and that our children can work things out. Bernadette finally broke the silence. I'm not so sure, Trisha replied, ending the call. Rick was furious. The thought that Sophie might not forgive him and would file for divorce made him want to lash out at Marcia. Who did she think she was? Did she actually believe this was serious between them? Sure, he liked her, she was sweet, kind, and attentive. She had this allure about her, always smiling, always praising Dana. At first, he paid no attention to her smiles, but then. Who would have thought Marcia would pull something like this? First, she introduced herself to his wife, then she told him she was late. How could she be late? He might believe it if they spent all their time in bed, but the kids were always around. They only found time together when the girls ran outside to play. And he wasn't stupid, he always made sure to use protection with her. Hello. Rick smirked. Marcia answered so quickly, as if she had been sitting by the phone, waiting for his call. I knew you'd call. How was the celebration? Ruined, thanks to you. Marcia, who asked you to call me? We agreed to stop seeing each other. I never promised you anything. What do you want from me? And don't even start with this "I'm late" nonsense, because I won't believe it. Where was her self-respect? Instead of keeping quiet, she kept trying to remind him of her existence. She'd wait for him near the school or offer Dana a sandwich. Enough. If he'd known she was this clingy, he never would have gotten involved. I'm not joking. I really am late. I called because I don't know what to do. On one hand, I want to keep the baby, but on the other, I don't want to mess things up for you. If your wife finds out, it could cause problems for your family, Marcia sighed. And one more thing, my daughter overheard my conversation with a friend and begged me to give her a little brother or sister. I told her I'd talk to you and think about it. She sighed heavily into the phone. Maybe you shouldn't involve the kids. Why are you doing this? I told Dana today that she's not allowed to visit your house anymore. Stop feeding my daughter sandwiches and stop hanging around my car in the mornings. Rick was getting nervous. He wanted to say more, but he didn't want to upset Dana. He knew all too well how persistent Marcia and her daughter could be. One had latched onto him, and the other onto Dana. I'll think about it and let you know what I decide soon, Marcia replied, sniffling. The line went dead. Rick looked up to see Dana standing in the doorway. She had her lips pressed together, shaking her head, and judging by her expression, the conversation ahead wasn't going to be easy. Sophie stared at her phone, unsure of what to do. She didn't want to talk to her husband. She only answered the call because she wanted to discuss Dana. Yes, I'm listening, she barely managed to say. She had so many questions for Rick, but to have a calm conversation with him, she needed to gather her patience and composure. But how could she stay calm when her daughter was in the same apartment as her father? Dana got into a fight with another girl at school. "We've been called to the principal's office," Rick said. "With which girl?" There was silence on the other end. Rick was in no hurry to answer, but Sophie's intuition told her the girl's name. "Sarah. Are you coming?" Rick asked uncertainly. "Of course. My mom's at work, so I'll get Faith ready and head over. If there's no traffic, I'll be there in an hour." With Faith's carrier in hand, Sophie rushed into the reception area. She introduced herself to the secretary, who immediately looked up from her monitor, stood, and opened the office door. Sophie's eyes were drawn to Dana's torn blouse. She stood next to her father while the teacher and principal took turns lecturing her about how conflicts should be resolved peacefully. As soon as Sophie entered the office, they fell silent. Dana ran to her mother, pressing herself against her chest, and for a few moments, they just stood there in silence. Sophie gently stroked her disheveled hair. "It's going to be okay, don't worry. Mom won't let anything happen to you," she whispered in Dana's ear. Dana clung to the carrier with both hands. "So, this is the mother of our troublemaker. I've been wanting to meet you for a while," the young teacher said with a sweet smile, glancing at the principal. "Mommy, please forgive me." "I won't do it again," Dana whispered again. "Please, come in and have a seat. We're going to have a long talk." The principal pointed to an empty chair next to Marcia and Rick, but Sophie didn't sit with them. She placed the baby carrier at a distance, seated Dana first, and only then did she sit beside her. "Yes, I'm Dana's mother. Could you tell me the reason I was called to the principal's office?" Rick got up from his chair, sat next to his daughter, and, despite her discontent, took her hand. Dana froze, as if unsure of what to do next. She tried to pull her hand away, but Rick wouldn't let her. Dana got into a fight with her classmate. She tore her jacket and scratched her face. Sophie glanced at Sarah, whose jacket pocket was indeed torn, and nail marks were visible on her cheek. Shifting from foot to foot, Sarah stood by her mother, glaring at Dana with hatred. "My daughter's blouse is torn too, or did you not notice?" Sophie responded calmly. "Dana started it." Sarah shouted. "Calm down, sweetheart. Don't yell, Mrs. Parker will handle this," Marcia interjected, while Rick lowered his head and sighed heavily. Unlike Sophie, Marcia looked impeccable. It seemed she had carefully prepared for this encounter with her rival. Bright red lipstick, a tight black dress, and matching red stilettos completed her look. "Let the girls step out and wait in the lobby, we'll call them back in later," the principal suggested. The young teacher quickly jumped up, opened the door, and led the girls out of the office. "Sophie, your daughter attacked another girl. It was so bad that we had to call security to separate them." The principal tried to speak politely and tactfully, glancing at the baby carrier where Faith slept, her expression tinged with regret as she looked at Sophie. Mrs. Parker shook her head, showing off her broken nail, but didn't dare interrupt the principal. "All the girls sided with Sarah and have shunned Dana. We understand that this isn't our business, but the problem's in your family." She paused. "Everyone in the class knows about them. We'll try to smooth things over, but..." She trailed off, shaking her head. "Thank you for your help, but it won't be necessary. I'll be withdrawing Dana from this school today. She will no longer attend classes here or be in the same room as that girl. I will not allow my child to be tormented because of her father's affair." Faith began to whimper. Rick picked up the baby carrier, but Sophie snatched it from his hands. "Don't touch her. You'll have another one soon. We'll manage without your help." She popped a pacifier into Faith's mouth, and the baby quieted. "What do you mean, with that girl?" Marcia interjected. All the girls confirmed that Dana started the fight. "She's ungrateful. While you were in the hospital, I took care of her. I fed her, helped her with homework. The room fell silent. Rick rolled his eyes and turned to the window. Mrs. Parker smirked but quickly wiped the smile off her face. The principal coughed a couple of times and pretended she hadn't heard anything. "If my husband hasn't paid you off yet, I hope he will soon. We're getting a divorce. I've moved to a new neighborhood with the kids. Dana stayed with her father for now, but after today's incident, I doubt she'll want to stay with him any longer. Live happily ever after. Just leave us alone." Sophie exhaled loudly, gripping the baby carrier. She was trembling. The independence and firmness she had shown during the conversation had drained her so much that it seemed she might not hold out much longer. "I'm not saying goodbye," she addressed the principal. "I need to talk to my daughter and then collect her documents." "May I go?" she asked, just to be sure. "Yes, of course, go ahead," the principal replied, glancing at Marcia, who was barely restraining herself from lashing out. Rick silently stood up and followed his wife. At the door, Sophie turned, gave him a cold look, snorted, but said nothing. "Dana, sweetheart. I need to talk to you." They stepped out into the lobby and stopped by the window. Sophie placed the baby carrier on the windowsill. Seeing her daughter's anxious face, she hugged and kissed her cheek. "Dana, I want to transfer you to another school. Are you okay with that?" Dana sniffled, nodded silently, and gave a crooked smile. Sophie noticed that she wasn't even looking in her father's direction. That was a good sign. "Will you come live with me and Grandma?" "Yes, I'll go. I don't want to live with Dad. Sarah said her mom would have a son with him, and then he'll leave me." "Dana, don't listen to Sarah. Dad loves you and will never abandon you." Rick squatted down, his lips tight, and glanced at Sarah. Arms crossed, she stood in the lobby, waiting for her mother, watching them with open curiosity. "Don't even think about convincing her to stay with you. Keep in mind, I won't leave Dana with you anymore. If you don't get it, let me spell it out for you, you're endangering our daughter's life. Look at what you've done to her." Her lips are still trembling, and her eyes are filled with tears, Sophie said. Inside, she was boiling. Jerk. He had humiliated Dana in front of the entire school. While the principal was reprimanding their child, he sat there silently, unable to defend her. "This is for you." Rick held out a set of keys. Sophie had a feeling she knew what the keys were for, but she wasn't in a hurry to take them. She looked at him with a questioning gaze, waiting for an explanation. "These are the keys to the apartment. I wanted to give you a gift for the birth of our daughter. But the surprise didn't work out," Rick sighed heavily and shrugged. Sophie glanced at his hands. It seemed to her that they were slightly trembling. A lump formed in her throat from the wave of bitterness that swept over her. She looked up and, seeing his troubled face, gave a crooked smile before snatching the keys from his hand. "If it's not too much trouble, pack up our daughter's things and send them to my parents' address." She saw Marcia leaving the office with their daughter. Holding the carrier in one hand and tightly gripping their older daughter's hand with the other, she glanced at her husband's lover and said a curt goodbye to Rick. With a proud stride, she walked past them, not even considering slowing down or paying attention to their piercing stares. Rick watched as his family, which he was losing at the speed of a jet, slipped away, and he didn't know what to do. There was one thin thread left. He hoped that through Dana, he could win his wife back, but before he knew it, he had already severed that invisible thread himself, doing everything possible to turn his daughter away from him. Right now, more than anything, he wanted to lock himself at home, shut out the world, and wait out the storm, though he knew perfectly well that he was the one to blame. If he didn't act, the storm would turn into a hurricane, and then nothing could be done. What a fool he was. There was a perfect opportunity to prove that not everything was lost by standing up for Dana in the principal's office and making it clear to Marcia and her daughter that he wouldn't let anyone hurt his daughter. Then Sophie and Dana would have looked at him differently. But instead, he acted like a complete idiot. Are you heading home or to work? I wore new shoes, and now I have blisters. I won't make it home. Can you give Sarah and me a ride? He heard Marcia's annoyed voice. Rick turned his head. Marcia was standing in front of him, holding Sarah's hand and smiling. He swallowed silently. The worst mistake would be to fall for her kind gaze and those legs in black stockings again. The thought made him laugh. Forget about me. I never promised you anything. And tell your daughter to stay out of adult affairs, he said, shifting his gaze to Sarah. Maybe he should have phrased it differently. But then again, why should he choose his words carefully? That little brat had hurt his daughter. Remembering how Dana had wiped her tears in the principal's office, Rick scowled and turned away. Do you really think your wife will forgive you? Marcia whispered. I have no doubt about it. Sophie is a smart woman, she knows I love her. Rick hesitated. A school wasn't the best place to sort out their relationship, but he needed to make it clear to Marcia that he wouldn't be manipulated by her anymore. Rick, Marcia sobbed, what makes your Sophie better than me? She raised her head, delicately wiped away her tears with her finger, and began sniffing and fanning her face with her hands. Mommy, don't cry, Sarah pressed herself against her mother's chest. I'm not crying, just something got in my eye. Marcia stroked her daughter's head and wiped her nose. So, are you going to give us a ride? She turned back to Rick. I have terrible morning sickness, by the way, thanks to you. Rick frowned. If they were outside, he would have loudly and clearly explained how respectable women should behave. And he would have put that little brat, who was glaring at him with contempt, in her place. No, he replied curtly. Marcia's beautiful, smiling face instantly flushed with red spots. Breathing heavily, she grabbed Sarah's hand. Barely restraining the urge to laugh in his face or slap him, Marcia sighed heavily. If only she had known that the stupid joke about a non-existent pregnancy would escalate this far, she probably wouldn't have tried to deceive anyone and would have found another way to win Rick back. Fool! She had listened to her friend, who assured her this was the only surefire option. Fine. We'll get there on our own. You go ahead and wait for your wife, maybe she'll take pity on you and let you carry the baby carrier, she snapped sarcastically. Then, with her heels clicking, she and her daughter walked down the corridor toward the exit. Sophie, you need to submit a request to transfer your child to another school. Within 2 or 3 days, we'll prepare the documents, and you'll need to contact the school you're transferring to and check for available spots. The principal tried to explain to Sophie the process of transferring a child to another school, subtly twisting the situation to her advantage. On one hand, she felt sympathy for the young woman, but on the other, she wanted to avoid any conflicts. I understand, Sophie replied, after filling out the transfer request form. Can we go now? Faith whimpered, and Dana leaned over to give her a pacifier, but it was time for the baby to be fed, and the pacifier didn't soothe her. Yes, of course. As soon as the documents are ready, we'll give you a call, the principal assured them. Dana left the principal's office in a much better mood. She was relieved that she wouldn't have to face the girls who had sided with Sarah and told the principal that she had started the fight. In reality, Sarah had been the one to start saying nasty things. Did you get the documents? Dana heard her father's voice and slowed her pace, glancing at her mother. What business is it of yours? Sophie snapped, walking past him with the girls in tow, not stopping. Sophie, let's not argue in front of the kids. It's hard for you, let me carry Faith, Rick offered, trying to take the carrier from her. I said, take your hands off. Sophie shouted loudly. I'll help carry her to the car. I can see you're struggling, he insisted, eventually taking the carrier despite her resistance. He carried it to the car. Sophie and Dana got into the back seat, where Sophie took Faith in her arms. Rick realized she was about to feed the baby. He opened the front door and sat in the driver's seat. Maybe we should all go see the new apartment together. It'll be hard for you to manage alone with 2 kids, he suggested, not turning to face her. We'll manage without you somehow. I need to get used to being without a husband. Just don't change your mind. I can expect anything from you, Sophie said, feeding Faith and then placing her back in the carrier. I won't change my mind. It's a gift. The car was stuffy, so Rick cracked open the window on his side. The apartment is empty and mortgaged. There could be issues with the transfer. You're not working right now, the bank might not approve. I'll have child support, Sophie smirked. That's not what I mean, Rick sighed heavily. Then what? Sophie asked. If you really go through with the divorce, I'll have to sell my apartment to pay off the mortgage. I'll buy myself a smaller place with the remaining money. I don't need a 3-bedroom apartment by myself, he said, and silence filled the car. Faith was asleep and Dana was busy with her phone, not paying attention to their conversation. I won't change my mind. You can put your apartment up for sale today, Sophie said after a pause. She wanted to thank him, but the words stuck in her throat as she remembered his actions. Instead, she said something else entirely. If you think this will earn our forgiveness, don't count on it. But I'm still hoping for your good sense, Rick replied, trying not to react to his wife's hostility. He turned his head and addressed Dana. Honey, please forgive me. I got flustered in the principal's office and acted like an idiot. They started lecturing me first, then turned on you. By the time I figured out why you and Sarah had a conflict, your mom came and handled everything. Sophie shook her head and smirked. Dana looked up from her phone, surprised at her father's words, but didn't rush to respond. Well done. When it came time to stand up for your child, you froze. But when you were visiting Marcia, you were all sharp and focused, Sophie sneered. You're playing the victim now. Have you forgotten how you yelled that a new woman would be moving into your apartment tomorrow? I saw your new woman today. Just keep this in mind for the future. If you plan on living with her, you'll only meet with the kids on neutral ground and with me present. I won't let Marcia or her daughter anywhere near my children. But who am I kidding? As soon as Marcia gives you a son, you'll forget all about Dana and Faith. Don't be ridiculous. I already have 2 kids, and I don't need anyone else, Rick interrupted. Well, I don't need a dad like you. Go to your Marcia, she's about to give you another child anyway, Dana cried out, pressing herself against Sophie and bursting into tears. I don't want to live with you, and I don't want Mom to forgive you. I'm tired of being embarrassed in front of my classmates because of my dad, she sobbed. Rick gripped the steering wheel tightly and sighed deeply. Hearing such words from his own child was painful. Dana, clinging to her mother, looked so helpless and miserable. She was crying uncontrollably, avoiding his gaze. Dana, I'm at fault, but I can't turn back time and fix everything. Please, don't say such hurtful things. You have one father, and I'm not going to abandon you or Faith. Even if you don't want to see me anymore, I'll still always be there for you. I don't need Marcia or her daughter. Sitting there and watching his daughter cry was unbearable. Rick clenched his jaw and slammed his fist against the seat in frustration. Mom, please tell Dad to leave, Dana whispered softly. Rick looked at Sophie. Silently, he begged her for some kind of support, though he knew there was no sympathy coming his way. He had hurt everyone who mattered to him, his wife, his daughter. If Faith were older, she would probably hate him too right now. Rick, just go, Sophie said, gently rubbing Dana's back. I hope this time you won't let us down and will keep your promises about the apartment. We'll definitely check it out today. I'll call you tonight, and we'll discuss everything in detail. After calming Dana down, Sophie wiped her face with a tissue. She whispered something in her ear. Dana shook her head, crossed her arms, frowned, and turned away again. I'll be waiting for your call, Rick replied uncertainly, opened the door, waved to Dana, and slowly walked to his car. Marcia was sitting in a cafe with Sarah, watching Rick. He had been sitting in his wife's car for 40 minutes, and it seemed he wasn't in any hurry to leave. How she hated Sophie right now. There was so much arrogance and pride in her gaze. She carried herself in the principal's office as if she were attending a reception with the Queen of England. Dana was just like her mother, spoiled and selfish. She had no respect for her father, yet he was ready to humiliate himself just to be forgiven. Fool! Did he really not understand that a loving woman would never behave like that? Marcia glanced at Sarah. After today's scandal, it was unlikely Rick would agree to meet her. She had told her daughter to be friends with Dana. That was the only leverage they had over her father. But her daughter did the exact opposite, and now she was looking at her with puppy dog eyes, afraid. Not everyone was as lucky with their husbands as Sophie was. Marcia's husband had left her when Sarah was just a year old. And so what? She cried a little, grieved, and then with her head held high, moved on with her life. She dated one man, then another, but none of them wanted to work. So, when she saw Rick, she knew she couldn't let the opportunity slip by. At first, she just wanted to keep Rick tied to her, meet in secret, receive gifts, have sex, and not pay attention to the fact that he was living a double life. But when he told her that he wasn't going to cheat on his wife anymore, she knew something had to be done. Seeing Rick get out of the car, Marcia left Sarah in the cafe and headed towards Sophie. "Hello." Startled, Sophie flinched. "What do you want?" Sophie scoffed as she started the car, but didn't roll up the window. "Be thankful I didn't blow things up and file a police report. If I hadn't shown mercy, Dana could have ended up with a record." "Trust me, there were plenty of witnesses," Marcia replied. "Did you come to ask about my plans with my husband? Looking to cover your bases? Remind me about your pregnancy? Or did you want to share some details he's been hiding from me? There was no need to involve the kids for that. You could have just called me." Marcia was stunned. Sophie smirked, realizing that any conversation between them was pointless. She gathered a mouthful of spit and spat in her rival's face. Before Marcia could react, Sophie rolled up the window, pulled out of the parking lot, and drove home, with Dana laughing in the back seat. As Rick drove away from the school, he turned his head and almost crashed into the car in front of him. Luckily, he managed to stop just in time, then parked his car and ran over to his wife's vehicle. "What are you doing here?" he barked, watching Sophie's car drive away. "What am I doing here?" Marcia grumbled irritably, wiping her face. "I came to apologize, but as it turns out, your wife isn't all there. Your Sophie is mentally unstable. She spat in my face. She needs treatment. Now I see where your daughter gets it from." Marcia squinted her eyes, trying to keep her cool, but she wasn't doing a good job of it. "Shut your mouth. If you say one more insulting word about my wife, you'll regret it," Rick said coldly. "Honestly, I'm sorry my wife only spat in your face. If it were me, I'd have knocked you over the head too. Are you serious? You think she was right to do that?" Marcia sneered. "Don't play the innocent lamb. Do you think everyone's an idiot and doesn't know why you were waiting for my wife?" Rick scoffed. "You came to apologize? That's a joke. You could have done that in the principal's office. We both know my daughter did nothing wrong. So, Rick, what's going on here? Where's Dana?" Bernadette interrupted him. Seeing his mother and father, Rick felt the blood drain from his face. "Mom, Dad, what are you doing here? We came to your work. We wanted to talk, but they said you went to the school." "Dana got into a fight with some girl," Bernadette said, looking at Marcia. "Nice to meet you. My name is Marcia. I'm the mother of the girl Dana attacked." Smiling sweetly, she continued, "Rick and I are having a baby." Trying to manage his emotions, Rick lowered his eyes. He had no words, only a bitter smile. His mind was a chaotic mess. After what Marcia had said, he had no idea how he would get out of this situation. "My dear," Bernadette took Marcia by the arm. You need to get rid of this child. My son just had his second baby, he can't handle a third. You must understand that he has a family, a wife on maternity leave, 2 small children. She looked at her husband, hoping for his support, but Aiden, wide-eyed with shock, could only glance between Marcia and Rick, shaking his head silently. Are you willing to burden your conscience by killing a child? Aren't you afraid of retribution? Do you really think that if I have an abortion, the troubles will just disappear, Sophie will forgive Rick, and they'll live happily ever after? Marcia scoffed. Well, Marcia, you didn't think about retribution when you started an affair with a man whose wife was in the hospital, did you? Or do you think you're special, that retribution won't catch up to you? Bernadette sneered. Look where it's led. The children are fighting. And what's next? So, maybe you should stop being disrespectful to your elders and start thinking things through, Bernadette retorted. I love Rick. But your daughter-in-law is a psychopath. And so is Dana. They both need to be isolated before they crack someone's skull and end up in jail. I suggest you take my advice seriously. Marcia had no idea what she was saying, but it was too late to back down. You wretch, I've had enough of you. Rick growled, lunging at Marcia, but his mother moved faster. She grabbed Marcia by the hair, yanking so hard that Marcia screamed. Bernadette shoved her roughly, and Marcia barely managed to stay on her feet. Bernadette herself almost fell but was caught by Rick just in time. It all happened in a matter of seconds, too fast for anyone to fully grasp. Mom, leave her alone. Let her go. But if she opens her mouth again and goes after my kids, I'll handle her myself. I won't hesitate to spend money to hire people who will quickly teach her to keep quiet. Marcia straightened her shoulders, glaring first at Bernadette, then at Aiden, who was barely containing his laughter. There are cameras everywhere here, and in case you've forgotten, I'm pregnant. I'll report you to the police, and you'll be arrested. I won't let this slide. Marcia said, wiping away an unwanted tear. She wanted so badly to respond to the elderly lady, but the odds were against her. Bernadette had 2 men at her side, ready to strike back at any moment. Go to the police, fine. We won't sit idle either. We'll hire a lawyer, and then we'll see who's right and who's wrong. I'm sure we'll uncover such dark spots in your past that you'll regret it, Rick said, while Bernadette smirked maliciously. Leave me alone. I'm sick of this. One spits in my face, the other yanks my hair. What do you all want from me? If I'd known you were all this unhinged, I wouldn't have gotten involved, Marcia snapped. My dear. If multiple people hit the same face, maybe the problem isn't with the people but with your face. Bernadette replied. Aiden burst out laughing again, Rick joined in, and they both started laughing together. Seeing them, Bernadette couldn't help but giggle too. Go ahead, laugh. But the one who laughs last laughs best. So this is what you think of me. You've decided to blame it all on me while making your son and his half-crazed wife the heroes. But it won't work. I'll talk to the principal, and he'll give your Dana such a bad recommendation that no school will take her, Marcia tried to spoil their mood. We'll see how that works out for you, Rick replied calmly. Just don't complain when you get hit again for no reason. We'll see who has the last laugh, Marcia said as she turned and walked toward the cafe without saying goodbye. I hope you realize who you're dealing with, Bernadette said. Stay away from that woman. Someone like her will stop at nothing. Don't answer her calls. I'm sure she'll try to manipulate you and tug at your heartstrings to get you back. If you fall into her trap again, you won't get out this time. Be smarter, son, you have a family, children. You've already made one wrong move, and if you make another, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. With a heavy sigh, Bernadette patted her son on the shoulder and glanced at her husband, who was still in shock, unable to believe that his wife had just yanked his son's mistress by the hair. Don't worry, I'm not planning on seeing her again, Rick muttered, clearly annoyed. But I have no idea what to do next. Sophie doesn't want to see me, Dana hates me. After what happened at school, I'm enemy number one for my daughter. Marcia and her daughter have done everything they can to turn my family against me. It's not just Sophie who doesn't want to see you. I talked to Trisha yesterday. Bernadette sighed again. I think if your mother-in-law gets her hands on you, she'd strangle you without a second thought. And honestly, she'd be right. If I were her, I'd probably do the same. I gave Sophie the keys to the new apartment today. I promised to sell mine, pay off the mortgage, and buy a smaller place for myself. I thought it might make her soften a little, but Sophie didn't bite. She thanked me and told me she's still going to divorce me. Rick knew he needed to forget about his own troubles and focus on Dana and Sophie. His wife had it much harder right now. She had a newborn to care for and a pile of problems that needed immediate attention. Good job. You did the right thing. Keep it up. Be smart, son, and shower your girls with care. They might push you away, but don't leave. Sleep in your car under their window if you have to, help out with money. Women love to feel cared for. Show them what you're capable of. Bernadette pulled out her phone, checked the time, patted her son on the shoulder again, and looked at her husband. All right, Aiden, let's go. Enough lecturing our son, I hope you won't disappoint us again. Rick waved at his parents as they got into the car. His mother's words about surrounding his girls with care echoed in his mind. He glanced at his watch. Sophie should be arriving home soon. Maybe he should take the day off and go see his family. As he unlocked his car with a click, preparing to get behind the wheel, he heard Marcia's voice again. Aren't you going to apologize? This was beyond the limits of decency. This woman clung to him like a burr, and her persistence was starting to get on his nerves. The hope that she'd get bored and leave him alone was fading by the minute. Are you crazy? Haven't you figured it out yet? He looked her up and down with disgust. What do you want? Don't get mad. You're just upset with me. I understand, maybe I overdid it a little. But I'm a woman, and I want to be with the man I love. I don't want to lose you. When a woman is in love, she doesn't realize when she makes mistakes. I can't help it. She said quietly, closing her eyes. I'm so tired of you. Get out of here. Rick got into his car and started closing the door, but Marcia grabbed it with both hands. You're not going anywhere until we calmly talk and decide what to do about my pregnancy. I said leave me alone. And I suggest you don't damage my property. Car repairs are expensive. Rick yanked the door. Let's talk. Get away from me, you crazy woman. Rick lost his temper and pushed her away from the car. Marcia let go, lost her balance, and fell onto the asphalt. Are you out of your mind? Give me your hand, she screeched. Get up on your own. Just so you know, I've got a dashcam in my car, he shouted through the open window as he slammed the door. It was then that he saw Sophie and Dana. He hadn't even noticed when they had arrived. Sophie placed the baby carrier on the hood of her car and watched as Marcia struggled to get up in her tight dress. Dana whispered something to her mother and smiled. Marcia looked stylish in that dress, but it was clearly not made for situations like this. Rick got out of the car and approached Sophie. Ignoring Marcia, he peeked into the carrier. The teacher called. Dana left her gym clothes in the classroom. We decided to come back. It's a new set, and it would be a shame to lose it, Sophie explained. Why don't I stay with Faith, and you and Dana go get the clothes? He could have gone to get the clothes himself, but he didn't offer. He knew leaving his girls alone with this crazy woman was dangerous. All right. Just keep a close eye on Faith. I hope I can count on you for that at least. Sophie said. And don't let Marcia near her, she added, taking Dana by the hand as they headed toward the school. Dad, make sure Marcia's gone by the time we get back, Dana said. Rick shook his head and smiled. Dana tried to avoid looking at him, but the intense hatred in her eyes had faded. "Don't worry, sweetheart. If she doesn't leave on her own, I'll help her out," Rick reassured her. Hearing this, Dana laughed and ran after Sophie. "Serves her right," Dana said with a smirk. It was actually funny watching her struggle. "I just wish I had thought to take a picture of Marcia." Sophie looked at her daughter's satisfied expression and shook her head. She understood that Rick's actions weren't right, no one should hurt a woman, but this was a unique situation. Marcia had pushed too far and should have known that every action has a reaction. "Sweetie, don't worry about it. Let your dad handle Marcia. We have enough of our own problems," Sophie responded, trying to keep a straight face. If Dad liked Marcia, he wouldn't have pushed her. He didn't even offer to help her up, Dana continued to reason. There was no point in continuing the conversation. Maybe Dana was right, and there really were no feelings between them, but what good was analyzing Rick's actions now? How could she overlook what he had done? First, he flaunted his affair with Marcia in front of their daughter, and then, when he was done with Marcia, he tried to discard her quickly. But it seemed Rick hadn't anticipated that Marcia had plans of her own. "I hate her." Dana couldn't calm down. Sophie sighed heavily. "Dana, let's not talk about Marcia anymore. We don't need her in our lives." Sophie turned to her daughter and stroked her head. "Here's your uniform." Mrs. Parker took a package out of the closet and placed it on the desk. "Have you decided which school you'll go to?" she asked. "No, not yet, but don't worry. I suggest you pay attention to Sarah's behavior. She's being raised by a single mother, and to make her mother happy, Sarah is willing to do anything. That's why my daughter got hurt. All because Sarah's mother set her sights on my husband." Mrs. Parker raised her eyebrows in surprise but said nothing. "Goodbye, Mrs. Parker. I hope my daughter has better luck at her new school." Sophie took Dana's hand, and they left the classroom together. Rick opened the back door of his car and gently placed the baby carrier on the seat. He got into the driver's seat and locked the doors just in case. He didn't want to risk his daughter's safety with Marcia around, who knew what that psycho might do. "You'll regret humiliating me in front of your wife," Marcia yelled, banging her fist on the window. Rick was about to open the door and give her a piece of his mind. How much more could he tolerate this nonsense? But at that moment, Sarah ran up and grabbed Marcia's hand. "Mom, let's go," she said, brushing the dirt off Marcia's dress. "Please, Mom. Let's just go home. It's all your fault." Marcia snapped, smacking Sarah on the back of the head. "I told you to stay out of it. What kind of child are you? I say one thing, and you do the opposite," Marcia hissed, making Sarah shrink back. Only then did Rick notice that Marcia's heel had broken. Sarah lowered her head and quietly started to cry. "I was just trying to help." "You fell," she whimpered. "Trying to help?" Marcia mocked her. "You're always meddling where you're not wanted. I'm going to send you to live with your father. You can beg for change with him and your grandmother." Marcia shot Rick a glance, then looked at her shoes, then at Sophie and Dana, who were running to the car, her face twisting as if she had just seen something disgusting. "Fine, let's go," she finally said, swallowing the lump in her throat. Limping, she took Sarah's hand and walked away. "Is everything okay? Where's Faith?" Sophie asked as she ran up to the car. "Everything's fine. Faith is asleep in the car. You should have seen the scene Marcia made here. She's completely lost it, and I was stupid enough to leave Dana with her. I'll never forgive myself for that." Unlocking the doors, Rick got out of the car, carefully took out the baby carrier, placed it on the hood, and winked at Dana. At first, she was a little embarrassed, but then she tilted her head and smiled. "Dad, will you come with us to see the new apartment?" she asked hesitantly, keeping her eyes on Sophie. "I don't mind, but only if your mom says it's okay," Rick replied, looking at Sophie. "Mom, can he come with us? Please, Mom." Can Dad come? Dana pleaded, clasping her hands together. Sophie shook her head. In silence, she placed the baby carrier on the back seat, slowly closed the door, took out her phone from her pocket, and checked the time. He can come, but don't get too excited. No one's planning to forgive him just yet. Marcia felt a sickening disgust in her heart. She turned around, and her mood soured even more. Rick was smiling at his wife, Sophie pretended not to notice, and Dana watched her parents with a beaming face, looking like she was about to jump for joy. Yanking Sarah by the hand, Marcia stopped in her tracks. She wasn't about to let Rick go so easily. He could solve all her problems, become a father to Sarah and a great husband to her. Together, they could conquer the world. If Sophie truly valued and loved him, she would fight for him. That fool wasn't even afraid of losing her husband, while Marcia dreamed of this man, saw him in beautiful dreams that always ended in either a wedding or a passionate kiss. It felt like she'd been searching for someone like Rick all her life, a handsome, smart, manly guy who knew how to make his woman happy. Compared to the men Marcia had dated before him, Rick was the best. Sarah, we're going back to Rick, and you're staying with him. I need to leave for a while. Don't you dare cry. If you want a dad like Dana's, you'll do exactly as I say. Got it? Sarah's eyes widened as she listened to her mother. She sighed heavily, nodded silently, and turned to follow Marcia, trying not to cry again. Rick, I need to deal with this pregnancy issue. I have nowhere to leave Sarah. Marcia paused, watching his surprised expression. When your wife was in the hospital, I helped you out many times. Now, it's your turn to help me. Take Sarah. As soon as I know when I'll be discharged from the hospital, I'll call you. And don't look at me like that. I don't know how long I'll be in the hospital, but it'll be better for you if I have the abortion. Marcia raised her voice. She turned around and walked away quickly before anyone could stop her. Have you lost your mind? Take your child. Unless you want me to turn her over to social services. Rick tried to scare her. I helped you with Dana while her mom was lounging in the hospital, sipping fresh juice, but I could have refused to watch someone else's child. But I didn't. Nothing will happen to your Sophie if she helps me out this time. And if she refuses, you can handle it yourself. If anyone knows, it's me. She emphasized her last words, looked at Sophie, smiled at Dana, and without paying attention to Rick's shouting, walked away without even glancing at her daughter. Marcia, stop. Rick ran after her, but Sarah clung to his arm. Rick, please, don't leave me. Mom needs to go to the hospital, and I'm scared to stay home alone. You're living alone now too, aren't you? Sophie and Dana left you. But my mom and I love you and would never do that. Mom says if you love someone, you do whatever it takes to be together. Rick stopped, trying to pull his arm away, but Sarah's grip was firm, and she wasn't letting go. That's it. I'm calling social services. Seeing Marcia wave her hand as a taxi stopped beside her, he pulled out his phone from his side pocket. Rick, you deal with Sarah. We don't have time for this, Sophie said with a crooked smile. Dana, let's go. Let your dad sort out his own problems. Dana got into the car. Rick glanced at his daughter. Dana pursed her lips, turned away, and tried not to look at him anymore. Leave me alone. Rick snapped, pulling his hand away again. Seeing that her mother had left, Sarah let go of his hand. Rick shook his head and smirked. Even a fool could see that Sarah was acting on Marcia's orders, thinking her mother was doing everything just for her. He felt sorry for the girl, but he wasn't going to play along with her crazy mother anymore. Sophie, as soon as I deal with Sarah, I'll call you. I'll find the child services number, drop her off, and come straight to you. Is that okay? He continued, not waiting for an answer. We were supposed to go see the apartment together. Dana, is your invitation still open? He asked his daughter. I suggest you don't delay with child services. Marcia is capable of anything. She might even accuse you of kidnapping the child. I'm sure Sarah would back her up, and her mother would only withdraw the complaint if you agreed to marry her, Sophie shrugged. I don't care. We're getting divorced anyway. I just want to help you out. Sophie started the car, turned to Dana, and said something to her. Dana shook her head but still didn't look at her father. Only when the car began to move did she turn her head and wave at him. Rick, don't call child services. I don't want to be sent to my dad. He's bad, he drinks with grandma. But mom is good. She just wants us to be a family. Like before, when Sophie was in the hospital, and you and Dana used to visit us, Sarah sniffled. Rick didn't want to cause another scandal by involving child services, but Sophie was right. Marcia was capable of anything. Hello, he said as he put Sarah in the car and locked the doors, stepping aside. Good, come on over, a woman on the other end gave him the address. She said they'd be waiting for him, and she'd prepare the documents that needed to be signed. As soon as Rick got behind the wheel and started the car, he heard exactly what Sophie had warned him about. Rick, I just called my mom. Sarah swallowed the lump in her throat and continued, well, I won't stay silent anymore. I'm going to tell everyone that when you used to visit our house, you would corner me when my mom wasn't looking and... Sarah bit her lip again and shrank into her seat, as if bracing herself for Rick to hit her. She sat like that for about 3 minutes before daring to open one eye, then the other. Her words pounded in his head, throbbing painfully at his temples. An inner voice kept telling him that if he chickened out and didn't go through with this, it would only get worse. But how much worse could it get? He desperately wanted to erase his encounter with Marcia and her cunning daughter from his life, to forget it like a bad dream, but unfortunately, no one had yet figured out how to turn back time and erase the most disgusting moments. Where are you taking me? Sarah asked, now emboldened. Where? To child services, Rick replied as he dialed Sophie's number. Hello. Sophie answered. Sophie, could you meet me at child services? I'll send you the address now, Rick said, ignoring Sarah. Is something wrong? Did your foster daughter cause more trouble? His tone made it clear, Rick wouldn't have called for no reason, but she couldn't resist teasing him. Let him not think his misdeeds would always go unpunished. Everyone has to pay for their actions eventually. Sophie, you were right. While I was calling child services, Sarah called Marcia, and she told her exactly how to behave next. This girl and her mother are heading for a bad end. In any case, I'll do my best to see Marcia jailed for slander, and Sarah sent to a boarding school. These people are becoming a danger to society, Rick said with a smirk, raising his voice on purpose so Sarah could hear him clearly. Can you imagine what that little liar came up with? She decided to take her mother's advice and make me out to be a criminal. Claim that I cornered her. His voice trailed off as Sophie went silent. Did you call child services? Sophie finally broke the silence. Yes, they're expecting me, Rick sighed heavily. All right. Dana and I will head over now. At that moment, Rick barely held back a tear. He knew his wife was furious with him, but she hadn't abandoned him in his time of need. Rick, you won't be able to put my mom in jail. Sarah mumbled uncertainly as soon as Sophie hung up. Her eyes were wet, and her lips were trembling. Why not? I can. And I'll send you to a strict boarding school for lying. They'll straighten you out there. Seeing her thoughtful expression, Rick shook his head and continued. You think you and your mom are so clever? You're wrong. I have a dashcam in the car that records everything on video, including our conversations. You won't be able to slander me. You'll have to pay for your lies. As soon as the specialist talks to you and realizes you're deceiving everyone, you and your mom will be in big trouble. Don't start a war with me, you'll lose and regret it. And just so you know I'm not bluffing, I'll involve the police too. Can I call my mom? She's sure you'll be too scared to take me there. After all, you're a good person, Sarah replied. Taking out her phone, Sarah dialed Marcia's number, but Rick didn't let her complete the call. He snatched the phone and shoved it into his pocket. It's better not to contact her right now. I'm sorry, but you'll only speak to your mom in the presence of a child welfare officer. We can't trust your mom, she might make you lie again. If you don't want her to lose custody of you, I suggest you tell the truth and nothing but the truth. Stopping the car, Rick turned to look at Sarah's pensive face. Deep down, he had doubts. Maybe this whole ordeal with child services was a mistake. Who knows what Sarah was really thinking? It was sad that Marcia only cared about herself, without considering the impact on Sarah's mental health. But on the other hand, if he didn't stop this girl now, who knows what her future would hold? Shall we go? Rick asked as he glanced around. Sophie's car wasn't there yet, but he had no doubt that she would show up to support him. I'm scared, Sarah whimpered. Don't be afraid. If you tell the truth, no one will hurt you, Rick reminded her, though his own heart was pounding with fear. But he had no intention of backing down. As soon as they entered the office, Sarah started crying again, which made Rick uneasy. Please don't take away my mom's custody. She's a good mom. Rick is good too, he never punished me. My mom and I wanted him to be my dad, but Rick refused, and that's why she got mad and made me lie about him. Sarah sobbed, wiping tears from her cheeks. Don't worry, Sarah, we'll figure everything out, the child welfare officer reassured her, gently patting her head. I hope you'll tell us everything. Sniffling, Sarah nodded, and as she began to answer the probing questions truthfully, Rick started to relax a bit. Shall we proceed with the paperwork? Someone asked him. Yes, of course, he replied. He desperately wished he could wake up and realize this was all just a nightmare. But the reality was that even after waking up, problems don't disappear, they pile up, eventually turning into one big issue. Sarah's phone buzzed in Rick's pocket, and he suddenly remembered that he had taken it from her. Glancing at the screen, he saw a message from Marcia. The audacity of this woman, she was so confident in her impunity that she feared nothing. I hope our plan worked. Were you able to scare Rick? Don't be afraid, stay strong. You'll see, everything will work out for us. Outside the office building, Rick spotted Sophie. She was getting out of the car with Dana. Dad, were you waiting for us? Dana asked, giving her mother a reproachful look. Rick, sorry it took us so long. I had to ask Mom to take time off work and stay with Faith, Sophie said. She understood that her husband had done something despicable, but as soon as she heard he was facing jail time, she rushed to defend him without hesitation. Dana was also worried about her father, anxious and urging Sophie to hurry the entire way. It's all right, Rick smiled. It seems like everything's okay, I got off with just a scare. I still can't believe Sarah didn't listen to her mother and refused to frame me. If she hadn't changed her mind, I would have had to prove that I never even thought of doing such a thing. Rick shook his head, then looked at his daughter's pensive face. I wouldn't be so quick to celebrate if I were you. Sarah's impulsive. I wouldn't be surprised if she changes her statement, and you'll have to prove your innocence all over again, Sophie said with disapproval, shaking her head and turning away. Because of his inability to keep his pants on, now the whole family had to clean up the mess he created. Mom, when Sarah and I were friends, she once told me in confidence that the man Marcia was living with. Dana paused, swallowing the lump in her throat as if she was debating whether to reveal the secret, but then continued. That man, while her mom wasn't home, he harassed Sarah. Eventually, she couldn't take it anymore and told her mom. Marcia kicked him out, but she made Sarah promise not to tell anyone. Dana lowered her head. Oh my God. It's beyond belief. Marcia had talked about living with a man who didn't want to work and treated her daughter poorly, but she had kept silent about his harassment of Sarah. Rick, you need to tell the child welfare officer about this situation. Let them find this man and deal with it, Sophie said, clutching her head. I was given a business card, I'll definitely call and report it, Rick replied, avoiding eye contact in shame. Unprincipled Marcia quickly figured out how to spin this disgusting story to her advantage. What a scoundrel. She just didn't consider that the situation might turn against her. Maybe we should stop talking about Marcia and her daughter and finally go see the apartment. Rick looked at Dana, hoping his daughter would support him. What apartment? Are you out of your mind? First, deal with your problems. How could you be so casual? After all the filth you've thrown at us and the kids, Sophie raised her voice. Do you really expect anything else? Yes, Dana and I came to support you, but that means nothing. I just don't want my kids to be pointed at and whispered about behind their backs, accused of something their father didn't do. Dana grabbed her mother's hand, but Sophie brushed her off. And one more thing. I'm worried about my children. With your crazy Marcia, anything can happen. I hope you understand me. Try to make her forget about us. If she comes after our kids again, you'll regret it. Sophie clicked her key fob and opened the car doors. Dana, let's go. Sophie checked her watch. Enough with solving Dad's problems, I'm fed up. Before getting behind the wheel, she turned back to her husband. As soon as I sort out transferring the child to another school, I'll file for divorce. If a summons comes, don't be surprised. After instructing her daughter, Marcia went to the store, bought 2 bottles of wine, and poured herself a full glass to calm down and lift her spirits. As she thought about what to do next, she emptied the glass. For a moment, she felt a pang of guilt, but she steeled herself and sent Sarah a message. No backing down now. If they decided on this, they needed to see it through to the end. Marcia was 100% sure Rick would back down and not contact child services. Strange. No one had called her. Sarah had read the message but hadn't replied. The daughter couldn't be afraid. Marcia poured another glass of wine and put the second bottle in the fridge. She looked out the window. The sun was shining and people were rushing somewhere. Only she felt trapped in a cage. She shouldn't have asked for time off work. She could have been among people. A pang of anxiety struck her in the left side of her chest. To chase away her sadness, she downed another glass. Why was she so unlucky? Wiping away a tear, she opened the window. She looked at the parking lot. Rick's car was missing. Where had they gone with Sarah? Unable to stew in her thoughts, she called Rick, but he didn't answer. Sarah's phone was silent too. Strange. She approached the window again. She wasn't worried about Sarah, being sure that Rick wouldn't abandon her, but her heart was unsettled. The doorbell rang. Marcia opened the door and, seeing 2 women, looked them up and down dismissively. Hello, are you Marcia? Yes, Marcia grimaced. We're from Child Services. We came to talk with you and see the conditions in which your daughter lives. May we come in? Inside, everything was a mess. There was an unfinished bottle of wine on the table. Her daughter wasn't home, and Marcia had no idea where she was. Without waiting for an invitation, the women entered the apartment. One of them scrunched her face, sniffed, and grimaced at the smell of alcohol. Marcia, do you know where your daughter is right now? Asked the child welfare officer. While Marcia was thinking of a response, the second woman went to the kitchen. What's the occasion? She asked, surprised. What's it to you? I'm in my own home. I'll do as I please, Marcia snapped. The woman took out a notebook and made a note. She pulled out her phone and aimed the camera at the kitchen table. Listen, what do you want from me? Marcia asked. The thing is, your daughter was brought to us today. Rick claims you abandoned her on the street, went off somewhere, and said you didn't know when you'd be back. To avoid complications, he contacted us. While Marcia pondered her response, the women exchanged glances, and one of them made another note in the notebook. Oh, you scared me. Marcia giggled. If you really want to put the child in an orphanage with a living mother, go ahead. And, yes, you can contact her father. He's a drunk and probably forgot his daughter's name. And his mother, she was cut off. Marcia, you're out of date. We contacted Sarah's father. He hasn't drunk for a year and recently got a job. If you don't want your daughter, he's ready to take her. Well, if my ex-husband has changed, then I have no more questions for you. Marcia poured the remaining wine into her glass but felt it wasn't enough. She retrieved another bottle from the fridge and filled the glass to the brim. Ignoring the surprised looks from the child welfare representatives, she drained it in one go. Any more questions for me? She asked with a crooked smile. No, we understand everything. You can't be trusted with the child, the welfare worker said. Perfect. Marcia threw her head back and laughed. Let her father take care of his daughter, and I'll sort out my personal life. And her grandmother can teach her to beg for charity. You don't even know that your mother-in-law passed away a long time ago. And your husband, along with a friend, is now busy with apartment renovations. Didn't Howard transfer money to your account for the child? Or did he deceive us? Marcia pressed her lips together and sighed heavily. She had indeed received the money from her ex-husband. She had initially planned to call and thank him, but then Rick appeared, and she forgot about her ex-husband entirely. So, I got the money, and... Marcia crossed her legs and leaned back in her chair. Nothing, the woman said, heading toward the door. Goodbye. We understand everything. You don't want the child. Tomorrow we'll meet with your husband, and if he truly has turned over a new leaf, then... Marcia waved her hand, cutting her off. Goodbye. I've already made my opinion clear. Let her father handle raising his daughter. I'm not opposed. The women exchanged glances but remained silent. Marcia opened the door and, once they had left, slammed it shut behind them. Sophie and Dana had left. Rick wanted to follow them, but he had to resolve some matters first. First, he needed to call child services and report the man who harassed Sarah. Second, he needed to deal with Marcia. This woman had become dangerous, and if not stopped in time, she could come up with even worse things. Rick dialed his classmate's number. He had helped him out in the past and was now convinced that Paul would help deal with the woman who cared for no one but herself. An hour later, they met at a cafe near Paul's work. Hi, Paul. Have you locked up all the criminals or are there still some left? Rick extended his hand as he sat down at the table. We're locking some up, and others are growing up, Paul smirked, shaking hands. Without wasting time, Rick explained about Marcia, her daughter, and how he had almost been accused of something unacceptable. Well, you're really in trouble now. Paul said. What do you want from me? I want to punish that scoundrel and I want you to help me scare her. You probably understand by now that she doesn't comprehend normal words. I'm most worried about my family. As a police officer, you know better how to handle this scoundrel, Rick said. I understand, Paul looked at his watch. Let's meet in about 2 hours. We'll take the lady out of town. I know a good spot, an abandoned farm. We'll sort things out there. I think after this unforgettable meeting, Marcia will avoid you. Paul finished his cold coffee and grimaced slightly. I'm busy right now. At 5, come pick me up. We'll deal with your Marcia. Make sure your phone is charged. We'll record a heartfelt confession on camera. 5 minutes later, Paul rushed off to the office, and Rick ordered another coffee. His mind was a mess, with thoughts piling on top of each other. He had initially planned to call Marcia to warn her that they were going to visit a friend today, but then decided not to rush things. He wanted it to be a surprise for her. The doorbell rang again. Marcia was sure the child welfare representatives had returned. She hesitated to open the door. She looked at herself in the mirror and adjusted her hairstyle. Hi. Are you letting me in? Seeing Rick, Marcia narrowed her eyes, then opened them again. "Why are you here?" she asked, letting him into the apartment. "Are you coming with me to a friend's place? We'll have a barbecue and talk about life. I'm sure we have things to discuss. I don't want to fight with you anymore. I'm tired of it." Marcia bit her lip in shock, losing her ability to speak. Her body was covered in chills from his smile, and a cold bead of sweat ran down her spine. "The child protection representatives just left my place. It was because of you," she said, barely holding back tears. "You pissed me off. I blew up. Then I regretted it, but by then it was too late. Get ready, we don't have much time," he said gently, tucking a stray lock of her hair behind her ear. For a few seconds, they stared at each other in silence. To hurry her up, Rick pointed to his wristwatch, tilted his head, and smiled sweetly again. "All right," Marcia replied and went to change. "Let me go." "Where are you taking me?" "I don't like this place, I don't want to go there." As soon as they were out of town, Rick's friendly smile vanished, and a predatory grin appeared on his friend's face. "Shut up and behave. This area is isolated, no one will hear you anyway." Grabbing her by the collar, Rick's friend pulled her out of the car and, despite her resistance, dragged her into a dilapidated building. "Hurry up, or I'll break your legs." Marcia tried to escape, but Rick grabbed her by the high ponytail she had gathered on her head and yanked her back with force. "You're going to pay for everything," he hissed in her ear. "If you move again, I'll definitely break your leg so you can't run away." In pain, Marcia started to cry quietly, but no one paid attention to her tears. Screaming was pointless, there was no one around. "Are you trying to kill me?" she stammered. "First, we'll get a full confession out of you, then we'll bury you." "We don't need any extra witnesses," Rick's friend said, sitting her on a dirty chair and pressing the barrel of a gun to her forehead. "If you move, I'll shoot." Closing her eyes, Marcia froze. "Come on, sweetheart, start talking. From the beginning." Marcia remained silent. Rick's friend pulled the trigger, but no shot was fired. The thought of actually being killed brought tears to her eyes again, and her teeth chattered with fear. "Shall we try playing Russian roulette again, or will you finally come to your senses and start talking?" he asked, pulling out some tape from his pocket and tossing it to Rick. "Bind her legs." Rick used tape to bind her legs and arms. Then, he pulled out a pair of scissors from his bag and cut off the ponytail that was secured with a rubber band on her head, tossing it onto her lap. "This is so you understand the jokes are over." "Rick, what have you done?" Marcia whispered faintly. Swallowing the lump in her throat, Marcia stared in horror at the ponytail lying carelessly on her lap, unable to believe what was happening. She wanted to scream again, but with a gun pressed to her forehead, playing Russian roulette with Rick's friend seemed pointless. She understood that the jokes were over as soon as she was pulled from the car. "I'm expecting your child," she tried to play on his sympathy. "You smell like alcohol. Don't make me laugh. Lie to someone else, I don't need it. I'm not a fool to have an illegitimate child. Don't you think you've gone too far?" "Well, nothing, I'll bring you down to earth. I really want to have your son. And the fact that I had a bit of wine, it's not a big deal," she said, closing her eyes to keep from crying again. "I'm fed up. You don't seem to understand what your behavior has caused. I have nothing to lose. You've taken away my family, spread rumors around town about us being lovers. You didn't even spare my daughter, driving her to a nervous breakdown." Without hesitation, he grabbed her by what was left of her hair and forced her to look him in the eyes. My God! This was no longer the man she had fallen in love with. In an instant, his face transformed into a menacing snarl, with furrowed brows and an unrecognizable, furious gaze. "What are you doing? It hurts." Marcia screamed, squeezing her eyes shut from the pain, then cracked one eye open to glance at the gun. She was most afraid that his friend would pull the trigger and actually shoot her. How could you trade Sophie for this wretch? His friend sneered, lowering the gun. Marcia breathed a sigh of relief. But when Rick slapped her sharply, she couldn't hold back a scream. You should have added poison to the tea instead of just mixing in drops for erections. I would have been over this long ago and living a peaceful, measured life. Seeing the stunned expressions on her tormentors' faces, she bit her lip. What a fool she was. Let's hear more about that. His friend pressed the gun against her forehead again. Start from the beginning. I see, Marcia, you have something to say. Let's start with the tea you gave my friend. And you, Rick, film our lovely guest. I think this footage might come in handy. I was joking, Marcia sniffled, but when his friend pressed the trigger again and nothing happened, she realized she wasn't ready to play Russian roulette. A friend recommended the drops to me. At first, I didn't want to use them, but then I realized that without them, nothing would work. I had to take the advice because I fell in love and didn't want to lose Rick, she said, sniffling. You wretch. Rick lunged at her, but his friend stopped him, placing himself between them and patting Rick on the shoulder. Rick, let's listen to her story and decide what to do next. It's never too late to bury her. Swallowing the lump in her throat, Marcia took a deep breath. Her eyes darted around frantically with fear, and her heart pounded wildly. Fool! Why did she mention the drops? If she survived, she would abandon this ridiculous idea of marriage. She needed no one. No one. It would be calmer this way. Men only brought problems. One drank himself to death, another refused to work, and the third harassed her daughter. She thought she could hold on to Rick, but he failed her expectations. The pregnancy was also a lie, she continued with indifference. And you know everything else. Why did you manipulate your daughter too? Rick asked, clenching his fists. The plan was simple. I thought you'd come to sort things out. I'd sit you down, drop the drops, we'd end up back in bed, and you'd finally understand that you couldn't escape me. Unable to hold back, Marcia started crying again. Forgive me, Rick. Let me go. If you let me live, I promise you'll never hear from me again. Now that Rick knows everything, there's no point in fighting for him. He'll never forgive me and come back to me. Her insides twisted with fear. The cut hair fell from her lap to the floor. Her arms and legs were numb. She had never experienced such humiliation in her life. Rick, what should we do with her? His friend broke the silence. I really want to strangle her, Rick said, and slapped her again. Marcia flinched and lowered her head. I don't want to dirty my hands on this wretch. Let her live. If she ever gets near my family again, she will regret it. Rick shook his fist in front of her face, then used scissors to cut the tape on her legs first, then her arms. Marcia immediately jumped from the chair but, seeing the faces of her tormentors, sat back down. I'd gladly leave you here. But we're not as despicable as you. Fine. We'll drive you to the city and drop you at the bus stop, Rick said coldly. I hope you understand that women like you are of no interest to me, and if even one hair from my wife or children is harmed because of you, our next meeting will be your last. After dropping Marcia off at the nearest bus stop, Rick glanced at his friend. Unlike him, Paul remained calm, as if nothing terrible had happened. Rick, however, knew he wouldn't be able to sleep tonight. For the first time in his life, he had laid hands on a woman, and even though he had done it to protect his family, it still felt revolting and disgusting. Paul, do you think I should tell my wife about this? He asked for advice. If you want to win your wife back, you should definitely tell her. I hope Sophie will understand that you acted for their peace of mind. Women appreciate when a man goes to great lengths for them. We didn't handle things perfectly, but some people don't understand mere words. If she doesn't stop, a psychiatric hospital awaits her. He smirked. Do you want me to drive you home, or will you head to your wife? I'll take your advice and go to my wife, Rick replied, feeling an inexplicable shiver inside. Good evening, Trisha. May I come in? Seeing that his mother-in-law was reluctant to let him in, he added, I need to talk to Sophie. It's very important. I'll count to 3. If you don't leave on your own, I'll call the police. And I suggest you forget the way here, otherwise, it will be worse for you. Your mistress has told the whole town about your affair, and I won't hesitate to spend money on a billboard with your picture, warning decent women to stay away from you. Trisha, I came to see Sophie. Let's not make a scene in the hallway, and let's talk calmly at home. I assure you, I didn't come empty-handed. I have evidence that I was being drugged. I didn't realize what I was doing and deeply regret betraying Sophie. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I still hope you won't be so categorical and will help us sort things out. Scoundrel. Trisha said. Turning around, she saw Sophie behind her. Sophie sighed heavily but, feeling some sympathy, let Rick into the apartment. Come in. The children were already asleep. Sophie silently directed him to the kitchen. I want you to watch a video. I know I acted horribly, raising my hand against a woman, but Marcia doesn't understand any other way. I hope she won't bother you anymore. He pulled out his phone and placed it on the table. After watching the video carefully, Sophie shook her head, and Trisha smirked. She turned on the kettle, set mugs on the table, and, not wanting to pressure her daughter, moved to the window. And so what? Sophie broke the silence. I could understand if it had happened just once. But you didn't stop there. You kept going back to her, which means you were okay with it. Our divorce is on your conscience, and don't try to shift the blame onto the mistress. I understand everything. I hate myself for my weakness. After the first time, I wanted to stop seeing her. I called you, Trisha, but you were ill, my parents left, and I was overwhelmed at work. I had to go back to Marcia. And she was more than happy to accommodate me. He lowered his head. Everyone is at fault except for you. Trisha couldn't hold back. I offered you my help a week ago, but you refused. You assured me everything was under control. And I believed you. Now it's clear under whose control you were. It's up to Sophie, but I wouldn't forgive him. Sophie, I love you, and I need no one else. If you forgive me, I will never cheat on you again. Rick dropped to his knees. You heard her yourself, she was poisoning me with some kind of drug, and I didn't know what I was doing. If you knew how much I hate Marcia and regret getting involved with her. Sighing heavily, he rested his head on her lap. Sophie, for Dana and Faith, let's try to start over. Rick, go home. Thanks for standing up for us. I hope that after this shock, Marcia will leave us alone, but the fact of the betrayal cannot be ignored. I spoke with a lawyer today. I'm going for a consultation tomorrow. I can't live with you. I'm sorry. You were a good husband and father, but something went wrong. Rick walked home in a dreadful mood. He had to endure a lot of harsh words from his mother-in-law, and Sophie had warned him that she wouldn't let the kid see him without a medical certificate from a doctor. But, to appease the gods, he was willing to go through that procedure. As soon as Marcia got home, she looked at herself in the mirror and was horrified. She needed to go to the hairdresser urgently and get a short haircut. She had always taken pride in her long, thick hair, but now she looked at herself and cried quietly. Hello. She answered without looking at the incoming number. Marcia, where have you been? I've been calling you all evening, but you didn't answer. Marcia heard her friend Fran's voice and burst into tears. What happened? Who hurt you? Fran asked, worried. Don't even ask. It's the worst day of my life. Marcia sniffled. Just as she was about to start explaining that Sarah had been taken by child services, her ex-husband's number appeared on the screen. Fran, let me call you back. My ex is calling. He probably wants to talk about our daughter. Don't go to bed, I have a lot to tell you. Marcia switched to the second line. Hello. Have you gotten drunk and decided that I'm waiting for your call? She asked with a smirk, continuing to examine herself in the mirror. I haven't been drinking for a long time. I'm calling about our daughter. I hear you've given her up. Marcia didn't like his words. What did he mean by given up? She just thought she'd be better off with her father. Do you want to take her? I don't mind. Go ahead. She replied without hesitation. Marcia was angry with her daughter and couldn't help herself. If Sarah hadn't started a fight at school, Rick wouldn't have lost his temper, and she wouldn't have gone through all this hell and lost her hair. Let her live with her dad now and see the difference. What a wretch. I hear you. Tomorrow, child services representatives will come to my house. I hope everything will work out. Howard replied with a sigh of relief, while Marcia snorted and ended the call. She didn't want to discuss this topic right now. If he wanted to raise their daughter, fine. She had enough problems of her own. Hello, Fran. She called her friend. I have so much to tell you. Marcia didn't finish her sentence. Nausea hit her throat and she dropped the phone, rushing to the bathroom. Marcia, are you pregnant? All the signs are there. You're crying, then you're feeling sick. Fran asked cautiously. No way. Marcia snapped, biting her lip. If that were the case, she would have to have an abortion. A week ago, she would have been overjoyed, but after today's nightmare of considering tying her life to Rick, she didn't want to think about it at all. Well, you do have experience with these matters. You managed to break up your ex with his fiancée. You went to him with an ultrasound picture, and Howard didn't disappear. His fiancée left him, and he married you right away. Fran laughed. Well, I got what I wanted, and what came of it? As long as his former fiancée wasn't married, he held on a bit, but after her wedding, he started drinking. At first, his mother scolded him, but then, after my father-in-law's death, she started drinking with him. No, I don't need such happiness anymore. At least he left us the apartment, and after the divorce, he moved back in with his mother. Marcia recalled that time with shudders. She had lost count of how many times she had argued with his mother and had to drag Howard home. And in the morning, he would run back to his mother. It was like a magnet pulling him there because she lived on the same floor as his former fiancée. Even when Valerie got married, he still lurked around every day and was in no hurry to come home. Well, I don't know. Fran said. People are different. I'd think 1,000 times before having an abortion if I were you. From what you've said, Rick is a very good family man. He made a mistake, but who doesn't? Men like that, if they fall out of a normal life, should be snapped up right after a divorce. The key is to be in the right place at the right time and surround him with care. You managed it once. Remember how happy you were when his wife was in the hospital? I think you can do it again. Well, we'll see. Marcia looked at herself in the mirror again and sighed heavily. She remembered how ruthlessly Rick had cut off her ponytail and then slapped her hard. No. She couldn't endure such humiliation again. She no longer wanted to be between life and death. In the morning, Marcia called her boss again, asking for another day off, and then rushed to the hair salon. The stylist gave her a short, old-fashioned haircut, which only worsened her mood. I think it was better before, Marcia grimaced as she looked at herself in the mirror. In the evening, as she walked home, she mulled over her friend's words, considering various options, none of which she liked. Marcia came home and went straight to the bathroom. Fran had advised her to buy not just one, but 2 pregnancy tests, but she decided not to skimp and bought 3 just in case. The first test showed 2 clear lines. The second showed a faint second line, and Marcia tensed up. She remembered that a friend of hers had a faint line on her test during an ectopic pregnancy. Wiping the sweat from her forehead, Marcia took the 3rd test. The more she prepared herself for the result, the more distressed she became, but she tried to stay calm. Panic set in when she saw the faint second line on the third test as well. "Hello, Howard." Two serious-looking women from Child Protective Services entered the apartment. Howard glanced at Valerie and tensed up slightly. If it hadn't been for his ex-girlfriend, he might have fallen into alcoholism. But when he learned that Valerie had separated from her husband, he decided to seize his last chance. He quit drinking, and with a friend, began renovating apartments. Valerie resisted for a long time but eventually gave in. She made him renovate the apartment before moving her belongings in. The women inspected every room, checked the refrigerator, talked to Howard, and asked Valerie several questions. They constantly made notes in their notebooks. "You see, Howard. We spoke with Sarah and concluded that she is very scared of you. Your ex-wife has drilled into her head that if she goes to live with her father, he will force her to scavenge through garbage and beg for money," one woman said, while the other took several pictures with her phone. "I don't drink anymore. You can ask my fiancé. Valerie and I are getting married in a month. I have a good job. Valerie works as a teacher, teaching math. We don't have any children. So we really want to take Sarah in and care for her. We will do everything we can to make Sarah trust us and become part of our family. Sarah is my daughter. Despite the divorce from her mother, I love her and won't allow her to end up in a foster home." After a lengthy conversation, the caseworker handed Howard her business card. "Take this. The situation is complicated. The girl's mother has abandoned her, and Sarah doesn't want to live with her father. We'll need to visit you a few more times to ensure your integrity, considering your past. We will, of course, talk to Sarah and try to convince her that you have changed and want to take her in. She is a difficult child. She constantly asks for her mother and doesn't believe that her mother has given up on her. It will be good if you and your daughter can get along." The women exchanged silent glances. "We hope everything works out. As of now, we have no complaints about you. The conditions are ideal, the apartment is clean, and the fridge is stocked with food." To confirm her words, the caseworker looked around the room once more, her gaze settling on the desk where Valerie checked homework in the evenings. "We will do everything we can to make Sarah believe in us," Valerie said, taking Howard's hand. "The doctors have diagnosed me with infertility. We were planning to adopt a child from the orphanage, but when we learned that Marcia had given up her daughter, we realized we had a chance to take Sarah in." The social workers smiled. The senior one opened her bag and put away her notebook. They gave a penetrating look first at Howard and then at Valerie. "It's good that Sarah has you. I think the girl is very lucky. Be patient, and I'm sure everything will work out for you." After these words, the women said their goodbyes and left. When Howard closed the door behind them, Valerie jumped into his arms with joy, and he laughed, spinning her around the room. Marcia lay in her hospital room, staring at the ceiling. Her back ached, but she didn't have the strength to turn over, close her eyes, or clear her mind of unwanted thoughts. She felt miserable. "Hello." Hearing her friend's voice, she shifted her attention and turned her head. "Hi. Thanks for coming." Marcia whispered faintly, wiping away an unwanted tear. "How are you feeling?" Sitting on the edge of the bed, friend reached out, wiped Marcia's tear-streaked cheek, tilted her head, and smiled. "Marcia, I don't recognize you. What's wrong?" "Everything will get better, losses will pay off, and new opportunities will open up. Aren't you the one who always told me to keep my head up and walk through life with confidence?" After the pregnancy test showed a faint second line, Marcia immediately called the clinic and scheduled an appointment. The doctor quickly sent her for tests, then for an ultrasound, and finally, urgently admitted her to the hospital. As she had suspected, it was confirmed as an ectopic pregnancy. They removed one of her tubes and warned her that while her chances of future pregnancy were low, they still existed. "It's easy for you to say," Marcia bit her lip and snorted. "Yeah, it's a lot easier for me." Fran shook her head. "You have Sarah, and I'm alone. I might seem cheerful, but at night I sometimes cry from loneliness. If I hadn't had the abortion back then," Fran waved her hand dismissively and turned away, unable to continue. How long could she blame herself for the mistakes of youth? Nothing could be undone. Life went on, and mistakes were left in the past. Now she needed to think about not making new ones. "You're brave, you didn't hesitate," had Sarah, and managed to convince Howard that she's his daughter. "I don't have that kind of determination. I'm a panicker and a coward," Fran smirked. Marcia sighed heavily. She remembered how she didn't want to have Sarah. The guy with whom she had a brief romance turned out to be married and immediately warned her not to be foolish, not to ruin her life, and to go for an abortion. Marcia cried for a long time, even scheduled an appointment, but Fran talked her out of it. By then, her friend had already had an abortion, and the aftermath was grim. She had to urgently go to a nightclub and find a candidate for fatherhood. The choice fell on Howard. He was celebrating a friend's birthday with his buddies. Howard got drunk and spent the evening complaining about how his beloved girlfriend had gone to visit her grandmother for a month. It was a shame not to take advantage of such an opportunity. "Howard wants to take Sarah," Marcia glanced at her friend's surprised face and lowered her eyes. "Have you thought it through? Maybe it's worth fighting for Sarah. And the fact that you haven't contacted social services or inquired about your daughter, you have a good reason. You were in the hospital." Fran placed her hand over Marcia's in anticipation of her answer. What if, God forbid, the secret was revealed, and Howard found out that the daughter was not his biological child? Just thinking about it was terrifying. Marcia shook her head and smiled wryly. "No, I've made up my mind. I'll give him Sarah in exchange for the apartment he left us. If he agrees to that, then I'm not going to stand in his way. But if he starts demanding alimony and wants to take the apartment back, then I won't give him Sarah." "Good afternoon," Sophie's lawyer extended his hand to Rick for a handshake. "The thing is, Sophie wants to resolve the property division issues before the court hearing. She hopes you won't claim the two-bedroom apartment you gave her for the birth of your daughter." All week, Rick had been trying to sell his apartment. A buyer had come up almost immediately. A young family was ready to move in. But Rick kept delaying the process, still hoping that Sophie would change her mind and decide not to disturb their family nest. It was so hard to part with it. "Yes, everything remains as agreed. I won't go back on my word," he answered, swallowing the lump in his throat. Regarding alimony, making a note in his diary, the lawyer set aside his pen. "You're probably aware that you not only have to pay child support for 2 children but also support your spouse while she's on maternity leave. I already said I agree to everything. Please tell Sophie that the buyer has made a down payment on our old apartment. As soon as I sell it, I'll pay off the mortgage immediately and, without waiting for the court, transfer the new apartment to my wife." 3 months passed. That's it. Sophie exhaled with barely concealed sadness as she glanced back at the city courthouse. Just yesterday, she couldn't believe that she and Rick would actually get divorced. She had hoped that before the court hearing, her husband would come crawling on his knees, begging for one last chance to save their family. But the night before, Rick didn't show up or even call. As her lawyer had warned, their divorce wasn't finalized on the first try. The judge gave them 1 month to reconcile, and then another. When it became clear that reconciliation efforts were futile, the final decision was made today. Now, all that was left was to obtain the divorce certificate and finally accept that their paths had diverged, and they were now ex-spouses. During this time, Rick had sold their old apartment, paid off the mortgage, and transferred ownership of the new apartment to Sophie. He even helped with some renovations using the remaining money. "Yeah," Rick said, not too cheerfully. The conversation wasn't flowing. They looked at each other, unsure of what to say. They were divorced now. Each would go their own way. The only thing that would continue to link them was the children. Sophie had no complaints about Rick at the moment. He often visited the kids. On weekends, he took Dana to entertainment centers and helped with the renovations. But how long would that last? Are you heading home? There was no joy on her ex-husband's face, but Sophie felt that, unlike her, Rick seemed confident and had no regrets. This thought only made her feel worse. Yes, she replied. Well, I'm going to drown my sorrows tonight. Tell Dana not to worry about me. Daddy's going to blow off some steam, Rick said, watching the lawyer leave. Right, you have the perfect excuse to get drunk. You're free now. You've provided a home for the kids and your ex-wife, so you can party and start new relationships with renewed energy. By the way, how's your Marcia? She hasn't been bothering you? No matter how hard she tried to stay calm, Sophie couldn't hide the bitterness in her voice. Why was she even starting this pointless conversation? You're wrong. I want to get drunk because I truly believed you would withdraw the divorce petition today. I thought we'd found a way to communicate and understand each other over these past few months. But, Rick sighed deeply and fell silent. Sophie looked at him in surprise but didn't say anything. What was there to say? She herself didn't know what she wanted. Her heart was breaking into tiny pieces, begging her to forgive him, but her mind kept bringing up painful memories that made her heart ache. What do you mean? But, she asked. I don't know. I was hoping you'd realize that I don't need anyone but you and the kids. But I want you to know, this court ruling doesn't mean anything to me. I'm still going to be here for you, whether you want it or not. You can come see the kids anytime, she replied calmly. And you? He asked a question Sophie had no answer for. She just shook her head and stayed silent. I'm not rushing you. Just promise me you'll think it over carefully, Rick said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear as he tried to look into her eyes. I promise, but let's talk about this later, Sophie answered, waving goodbye as she headed towards her car. Open up. Howard, I want to see my daughter. If you don't open the door, it'll be worse for you. At 2 a.m., a drunken Marcia was yelling and banging on the door with her foot, disturbing the entire building. This wasn't her first visit in the past month and a half. Nearly every Friday, after leaving a restaurant, Marcia would show up, waking up all the neighbors. She'd call in the morning to apologize, but by the end of the week, she'd forget all about it and do it again. You think you bought me off with an apartment? Ha! No way. As soon as Howard opened the door, Marcia flipped him off and barged into the apartment without waiting for permission. Do you want me to call the police again like last time and have them take you away? Howard asked with disgust, standing protectively in front of Valerie. I had to disconnect the intercom and doorbell because of you. You only remember your daughter when you're drunk. Do you even care about Sarah? She's just starting to get used to living here. Don't you realize that your behavior is pushing her away, embarrassing her in front of the neighbors and her new friends? Or do you just not care? Where's your conscience? Howard glanced at the tightly closed door behind which Sarah was sleeping. Thank goodness she had gone to bed late tonight and didn't hear her unstable mother pounding on the door again. Sarah never showed it, but she was always deeply affected by her mother's actions. She knew her mother had abandoned her, but she still loved and pitied her. Thankfully, Valerie had managed to unlock the key to Sarah's heart. They cooked together, did homework together, cleaned together. Although Sarah was cautious around them, seemingly always expecting a trap, Howard and Valerie did everything they could to make her feel comfortable and trust them. My conscience is clear. But yours, Marcia laughed. You're such a fool. And you're Valerie, too. That's it, I've had enough. Howard grabbed Marcia by the scruff of her neck and opened the door. She fought back with all her strength, but Howard dragged her out to the elevator. If you show up here again, it'll be your own fault. I won't let you mess up my child's mind. Consider my patience officially over, he said, shoving her into the elevator and frowning with displeasure. What are you talking about? Marcia laughed, but then she suddenly fell silent, pointed her finger at him, and yelled, we'll see what happens when you find out that Sarah isn't your daughter. I tricked you, you fool. I made you raise someone else's child, and you believed it." She threw her hands up in the air and laughed until the elevator doors closed. Howard pressed the elevator button, but it was too late. The elevator had already started descending. He turned around and saw Valerie standing at the open door, shocked, with a disheveled Sarah behind her, barely holding back tears. "Damn it!" Howard cursed, unable to contain himself. He slammed his fist against the wall with all his might. Why couldn't that vile woman just leave him alone? He hadn't asked anything of her. Why was she trying to poison his life and that of their child? Without saying a word, he rushed downstairs. He wouldn't rest until he got the truth out of her, even if it meant causing a huge scene. "Howard, where are you going?" Valerie called after him. He heard a sound like sobbing, but he didn't stop. Taking 2 steps at a time, he raced down to catch up with the elevator. "Well, sweetheart, ready to talk?" Howard said, catching Marcia on the first floor. He grabbed her by the elbow and dragged her outside. "Start talking," he said, clenching his fists. "What is there to say? I already told you everything. Sarah isn't your daughter. When I was pregnant, I prayed she'd look like me." Marcia lifted her head and laughed loudly again. "God heard my prayers. But you were too busy mourning over your precious Valerie who wouldn't forgive you and left. I told you she was an idiot." Howard lowered his head and sighed heavily. It seemed like Marcia was out of her mind, otherwise, everything she was saying made no sense. Her cruelty knew no bounds, and the news that Sarah might not be his daughter was killing him. "Do you understand the consequences of what you're saying?" he asked, still hoping Marcia would laugh and say it was all a joke. But instead, she just gave him a smug grin. "What consequences?" she shrugged, pulling out a pack of cigarettes from her purse and lighting one. "I'll do a DNA test, and if it turns out I'm not the father, I won't let you take Sarah. I'll raise her myself, and I'll kick you out of the apartment. I'll find a good lawyer who'll help me deal with a lowlife like you. I'm sure I'll win." Hatred, confusion, and bitterness boiled inside him. Could this woman really be so heartless, with a piece of ice instead of a heart? "Then I'll take Sarah from you. You mean nothing to her. You're a stranger," Marcia responded calmly. Valerie and Sarah, terrified, rushed outside. "Mom, is it true?" Sarah asked, clinging tightly to Valerie as if she were her last lifeline. "Yes." Marcia replied curtly. "Pack your things. We're going home. You're nothing to them. Your real father disappeared as soon as he found out I was pregnant, and I never saw him again. Don't fool yourself, Howard is not your father." Howard approached Sarah, wrapped his arm around her shoulders, and pulled her close. At that moment, he wanted nothing more than to tear everything apart and rip Marcia to shreds. "She's not going anywhere with you. She's my daughter." Howard stroked Sarah's head and held her even tighter against his chest. He glanced over at Valerie, who silently nodded in agreement. She stepped closer, wrapping her arms around Sarah as well, whispering in her ear to reassure her that everything would be okay. In this entire situation, only Marcia seemed to be enjoying the scene, completely indifferent to Sarah and Howard. It was as if she derived immense pleasure from causing pain to others. "Sarah, are you coming with me, or are you staying with them?" Marcia asked, raising an eyebrow in surprise. When Sarah didn't move, Marcia smirked. "I didn't expect this from you, but it's not like I really cared." Finishing her cigarette, she tossed the butt onto the ground. "If you're siding with your so-called father, then I have no reason to stay here. Just don't cry later if they decide to abandon you. I'll ask you one last time." She looked at her daughter. "Are you coming with me or staying with them?" Just hours ago, Marcia hadn't even considered taking her daughter back, but seeing the happy family made her realize she couldn't sleep unless she ruined their lives. Sarah hesitated, trying to free herself from her father's embrace, but Howard wouldn't let go. Instead, he pulled her trembling body even closer. "Stop filling Sarah's head with lies. I'll never abandon her. Unlike you, I love her and won't let her mother continue ruining her life. Get ready for court. Maybe when you're left out on the street, you'll realize what you've done. But it'll be too late. You've made me angry." Howard looked at Sarah, and seeing the guilt in her eyes, he lifted her up and kissed her cheek. With his free arm, he pulled his wife closer, and together they headed home. "What a lovely little family," Marcia shouted after them, but no one paid any attention. Fran was jolted awake by the sound of the doorbell. She frowned, glancing at the clock. It was her day off. Who would be up so early? Her head was pounding. She and Marcia had overindulged at the restaurant last night. Fortunately, she had convinced her friend not to order another bottle of wine. "Hey! Why are you here so early?" Fran asked, scowling as she saw Marcia at the door. Slamming the door behind her friend, she slowly walked into the room. "Fran, you have no idea what I did last night. Howard's kicking me out of the apartment." Marcia's eyes were red and swollen, her lips trembling, and the dark circles under her eyes made her face look pale and lifeless. "You actually went back to Howard's after the restaurant?" Fran groaned, clutching her temples as she collapsed back onto the couch, closing her eyes. "You said you wouldn't bother them anymore." Wiping away her tears, Marcia sighed heavily. "I did say that. But instead of going home last night, I went back to their place. I don't know what came over me," she sniffled, shaking her head. "I told Howard that Sarah isn't his daughter." The room fell silent. Fran, momentarily forgetting her headache, opened her eyes and looked at Marcia. "Are you serious?" she asked, her eyes wide with disbelief. When she saw Marcia biting her lower lip and silently nodding, Fran could only turn away with a disgruntled snort. "You're such an idiot. I hope Howard didn't believe you." "If only," Marcia groaned, wiping away tears. "He was already at my place this morning. He said he's filing the court papers on Monday. If I don't return the apartment willingly, he'll make me pay all the legal fees. I have no idea what to do now." She swallowed the lump in her throat and wiped away another tear. "And what about Sarah?" Fran asked. "What about her?" "Howard said he wouldn't abandon her. He claims he loves her and will raise her as his own," Marcia said, mocking her ex-husband's words. "Do you think I should fight, or is it better to just agree and avoid going to court?" Fran shrugged, and Marcia shook her head with a crooked smile. "Will you let me stay with you?" "No. Don't take it the wrong way, but I'm used to living alone. How many times have I told you to think with your head? You're a grown woman, you have a job, you get paid, you handed your daughter over to your ex-husband. Rent an apartment, and if you're short on money, find a side job." As Fran spoke, Marcia stared at her, unable to move. She was frozen, as if paralyzed by the cold. Every word tightened around her throat, bringing tears to her eyes. What kind of friend was this? Her face was a mask of indifference, with no trace of sympathy in her eyes. "You're such a snake." Marcia spat. "If I hadn't listened to your advice, maybe I wouldn't be in this mess. You're the one who convinced me to keep the baby and declare Howard as the father. If only you knew how much I hate you. You're a wretch, and all your advice is completely foolish." Marcia's hands were trembling with rage, and her heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst out of her chest. "Calm down, there's no need to get worked up. If we fight now, it won't help either of us." Fran tried to defuse the situation. "Go to hell. How could I have been friends with you for so many years? It's written all over your face that you're a—" Marcia didn't finish her sentence. Instead, she lunged at Fran, grabbing her hair and dragging her across the floor, screaming. "I hate you. I hate you. It's all your fault. You witch. You've ruined my life." She dragged Fran to the door and slammed her head against the doorframe with all her might. Fran immediately stopped resisting, her body going limp. She mumbled something incoherent, but Marcia was already beyond stopping. Without a second thought, she slammed her head against the corner again, and only then did she let go, shoving her aside. That would teach her a lesson. Next time, she'd think twice before giving out advice. Trying to calm down, Marcia sat on the couch. She closed her eyes and clasped her trembling hands together. She sat there for about 5 minutes, and when she opened her eyes and looked at her now motionless friend, it took her a few seconds to realize where the blood had come from. As she got closer, she noticed an iron standing near the wall that she hadn't seen in her fit of rage. With a mixture of shock and horror, Marcia stared at her friend's lifeless body. Her thoughts were a chaotic mess, racing through her mind at lightning speed. The last thing she wanted was to end up in prison. There was nothing she could do for Fran now, but she wasn't about to ruin her own life. If she could slip out of the apartment unnoticed, she could create an alibi, and no one would dare accuse her of her best friend's death. She'd make sure to be careful and show everyone how deeply she was grieving. Praying, Marcia left the apartment. She called the elevator and rode down to the first floor. She darted outside and walked quickly to the bus stop without looking back. It seemed everything had gone smoothly. She had ridden the elevator alone, and no neighbors had seen her in the building. If anyone had spotted her through a window, they surely wouldn't have paid her any attention. As soon as she got home, the first thing Marcia did was pack away the boots she had worn to Fran's place. She stripped off her clothes. It was a shame to ruin an almost new dress, but she wasn't going to leave any evidence. The dress, along with her underwear, jacket, purse, coat, and Fran's apartment key, all went into the trash bag. She made sure she hadn't forgotten anything. Now she needed to secure an alibi. While riding the bus, she came up with a decent story. All that was left was to talk to Howard. Hello. Marcia looked at her ex-husband and barely recognized him. Where was the man who used to drink endlessly? Now, sitting before her was a man in expensive clothes, wearing an expensive watch, exuding confidence and making it clear that she wouldn't fool him again. What do you want? Howard asked tiredly, without even looking at Marcia, glancing at his watch instead. I was thinking. Marcia hesitated, scratching her temple. I don't want to go to court with you, but I have a really good offer for you. What is it? If anyone asks. Marcia sighed heavily, biting her lip. You need to change the time you came to see me. Instead of saying it was 9 a.m., you should say you came at 10 and left at 11. She looked at Howard's indifferent face again. Is that all? He asked with a smirk. No. I don't want to fight with you anymore. I realize now that you're a really good person. So, I have a counteroffer for you and Valerie. You leave me the apartment, and in return, I'm willing to be a surrogate mother for you and Valerie. I'll give birth to your own biological child. Sarah can stay with you for now, and when she's older, she can decide who she wants to live with. Maybe when you have your own child, she'll feel like she's in the way. Marcia said it all in one breath. The idea had come to her unexpectedly, and she latched onto it. First of all, pregnant women often get sympathy. And secondly, if Howard and Valerie agreed to this, they would back up any alibi she gave. It wouldn't be hard for her to do a good deed and give birth to a child for the genetic parents. She'd endure 9 months, but she'd stay free and live her life as she pleased afterward. Couldn't you come up with anything better? Howard asked calmly, though the slight tremble in his fingers betrayed his nerves. Why don't you and Valerie talk it over, think it through until tomorrow? If you decide, I'm at your service. I promise I'll quit smoking, and I won't drink anymore. We'll draft a contract stating that I'm obligated to hand over the baby after birth. You'll be registered as the legal parents. We'll do IVF, and everyone will benefit. I've wronged you, and I want to make it right. Marcia opened the car door and stepped out. She had purposely asked Howard to drive her home so that the neighbors would see them together. "I'll be waiting for your call tomorrow. Give my regards to Sarah and Valerie. Tell them I've decided to get my act together, and there won't be any more late-night visits," she said with a smile and headed toward her building. "Hi. Can I come in? Sorry it's late. Dana called and asked me to help her with a project." Seeing the surprised look on Sophie's face, Rick quickly tried to explain. "Come in," Sophie shrugged, glancing at the clock but saying nothing more. It was almost 9, and she still needed to bathe Faith, feed her, and put her to bed. Meanwhile, Dana was following her around, sniffling and begging for some attention, which Sophie was struggling to find. "Dad, thanks for coming," Dana broke the tension, grabbing Rick's hand and, ignoring her mother, led him to her room. Rick still lived with his parents, but he practically visited every day, bringing groceries, having dinner, and spending time with the kids. At first, Sophie had hinted that he shouldn't visit so often, but she caught herself wanting to see him, too. Sophie felt like she was split in two. One part of her had long forgiven him, while the other remained opposed to his visits, constantly reminding her of past events that made her heart ache. After putting Faith to bed, Sophie sat in the kitchen, sipping tea and watching TV. Rick was still in the older daughter's room. They were making something together, coloring and arguing. "Mom, Dad and I decided that it's too late for him to go home, so he's going to sleep in my room tonight and take me to school tomorrow. The project we made is too big for me to carry by myself. Is that okay?" Dana asked, clasping her hands in a pleading gesture. Sophie looked at her daughter and barely held back a laugh. She glanced over at Rick. Her ex-husband stood behind their older daughter, looking like a guilty schoolboy, waiting for her decision. The school was just a block away, so there was no need to start the car in the morning or dress Faith to drive Dana. It was quite convenient. "Well, if that's what you both want, I don't mind. Just make sure to let Grandma and Grandpa know so they don't worry." Upon hearing the response, Dana jumped with joy, and Rick, smiling, began to gently remind her to quiet down so as not to wake Faith. Marcia returned home in a great mood. She headed straight to the kitchen. Thankfully, she had stopped by the store yesterday after work and picked up a bottle of wine. She needed a drink. Her mind was racing, and her body was trembling. She had to drink for Fran, so that Fran wouldn't hold a grudge against her. It all happened by accident. No one intended to kill anyone. It was Fran's own fault. She shouldn't have been saying such nonsense. It was no big deal. Fran's parents would bury her and move on. Only God knows how much she had tormented them. Now the old folks could live in peace. After 2 glasses, Marcia felt significantly better. She remembered Howard's pensive expression and smirked. Fool. He clung to his Valerie, and now he had to raise someone else's children. But it didn't matter. She saw how intrigued he was by her proposal. He was so thrilled his hands even started shaking. Now, she just had to wait until Monday. Marcia went to the living room, lay down on the couch, and closed her eyes. She needed to shut off her mind, get some sleep, and forget everything. How long could she keep tormenting herself? Fran was gone, and nothing could bring her back. Marcia was awakened by the loud sound of the doorbell. She got up slowly, opened the door, and saw 2 men standing there. Surprised, she raised an eyebrow and smiled. "What can I do for you?" she asked, carefully examining their badges. "Your close friend Fran was murdered in her apartment today." "May we come in?" the man said loudly. Oh my God! Could someone have seen her leaving Fran's apartment? That couldn't be. And why had they found her so quickly? By her calculations, Fran's body should have remained undiscovered until Monday. This can't be true. Fran, Marcia contorted her face and covered her mouth with her hand. "Come in," she whispered, pretending she still couldn't believe what was happening. "When did this happen?" "We were at a restaurant last night." We parted ways late in the evening. Fran was in a great mood. She was laughing and joking a lot. You claim you didn't see her this morning, the older detective asked as he walked into the living room, surveying it with his eyes. No, she said confidently, trying not to give herself away, though her insides were trembling. Marcia, a full confession can reduce your sentence. Witnesses saw you running out of Fran's building and rushing to the bus stop this morning. Where were you headed in such a hurry? The second detective asked. You were seen by your friend's relatives. They arrived from the countryside and stopped by Fran's place to drop off groceries her parents had sent. Her mother had called her both yesterday and this morning, but Fran didn't answer. Her parents had given the relatives a spare key to her apartment, just in case. They pulled up to the building just as you were rushing out. They even honked at you, but you were in such a hurry that you didn't notice. The room fell silent for a few minutes. They were mistaken. That wasn't me. I was home this morning. I have a witness. My ex-husband came over. You can call him, Howard will confirm, Marcia said, dialing Howard's number and handing the phone to the detective, praying he wouldn't betray her. Hello, this is Detective Samuel Ross, investigating criminal offenses, the detective said, putting the phone on speaker and keeping his eyes fixed on Marcia. I'm listening, Howard replied calmly. Marcia claims you spent the entire morning at her apartment. Can you confirm this? There was silence on the other end for a moment, but then Howard spoke up. I arrived at her place at 9 a.m. and left about 40 minutes later. She called me afterward, tearfully asking me to come back. When I did, she asked me to say that I'd been at her place from 10 to 11. The detectives exchanged glances, and Marcia buried her face in her hands, bursting into tears. Scoundrel. What kind of men are there these days? You can't rely on a single one, Marcia said, wiping away her tears. She sank into a chair, crossed her legs, picked up a pack of cigarettes, and smirked. Yes, I killed her. After putting Dana to bed, Rick entered the kitchen and sat down next to Sophie. He hadn't felt such peace in a long time. When Dana suggested he stay the night, he was sure Sophie would refuse, but to his surprise, his ex-wife didn't protest. That was a relief. Sophie. I feel so lost without you. I love you, he said, moving closer to her. He looked at her thoughtful face and barely restrained himself from kissing her. I don't want to revisit the subject of my betrayal. It's clear I was wrong, but I'm certain it won't happen again. I'm ready to do whatever it takes to work on our relationship, to make our family happy. But I need to know that you want this too. The thing I fear most is hearing that you no longer love me and don't need me anymore. Rick, Sophie tried to pull away, but she couldn't. Remember, you promised to think about it, he whispered softly, then pulled her even closer, burying his face in her hair. They sat there in complete silence for several minutes. Finally, Sophie looked up at him. Rick closed the distance between them and kissed her. He braced himself for a slap, but to his surprise, she kissed him back. Their lips met in a passionate kiss. Rick realized that his efforts weren't in vain, Sophie had forgiven him and decided to give him another chance. Meanwhile, Valerie asked. Who were you talking to just now, as Howard casually tossed his phone onto the coffee table and sighed deeply. A detective. He was asking what time I was at my ex-wife's apartment this morning. Valerie wrapped her arms around his waist, nuzzled his neck, and smiled with her eyes closed. It was such a relief to have no secrets between them. As soon as Howard returned from seeing Marcia, he had told her everything. They had laughed together about Marcia's proposal and quickly forgotten it. I hope you told the truth, she asked. Of course, Howard replied, swallowing hard and pausing briefly. If I understood correctly, she's suspected of murdering her friend. I'm not sure what happened, but I'm convinced Marcia was involved. Otherwise, she wouldn't have asked me to confirm her alibi or offered to have a child with us. She foolishly thought I'd fall for such nonsense. Another kiss on the neck made Howard forget the unpleasant conversation, and he purred with pleasure. You know, maybe we should actually consider using a surrogate to have another child. What do you think? We could look into it, find out how much it would cost, he suggested. Valerie bit her lower lip and smiled softly. Howard, I didn't want to tell anyone just yet, not even you, because I knew that if it didn't work out, you'd be disappointed, even if you didn't show it. Howard's expression was priceless. At first, he couldn't process what she was saying. He stared at Valerie, digesting her words. Then he replayed recent events in his mind, recalling how she had felt unwell 2 days ago and had refused to eat fried fish last week, something she used to love. Instead, she had taken out a jar of pickles from the fridge and eaten the entire thing. His eyes widened, and he glanced at her flat stomach. He had his suspicions, but he wasn't ready to voice them. Go on, he said, his face a mix of confusion and surprise. I'm pregnant. We're going to have a baby, Valerie finally confessed, lowering her gaze shyly. But you said, Howard began, but before he could finish, they were interrupted by Sarah's voice. Sarah stood in the doorway, wiping tears from her eyes instead of sharing in their joy. Now you won't need me anymore, and you'll send me to an orphanage. Her voice was filled with pain, barely holding back the urge to run away. While Howard struggled to find the right words, Valerie quickly approached Sarah and gently wiped away her tears. Sarah. I love you so much. You're our good luck charm. If your dad hadn't brought you into our family, we might never have been able to have another child. Thank you, sweetheart, for being with us. Valerie hugged Sarah tightly and added, we do everything together now, cooking, cleaning, shopping. How am I supposed to raise this baby without my faithful helper? I couldn't manage without you. Valerie paused, choosing her words carefully, and when Sarah finally smiled, Howard snapped out of his daze. He wrapped his arms around his girls and, with a sigh of relief, said, everything's going to be all right now. I promise you, sweetheart. A year passed. Dana was overjoyed that her father was now living with them. At first, Sophie, despite trying to hide it, was cautious around her husband. Rick understood this and did everything in his power to avoid causing her any more distress. He hurried home after work, and on weekends, he took on more of the family responsibilities to give Sophie a break. He knew that his betrayal had left a deep scar on Sophie's heart, and he fully understood that for the rest of his life, he would be under her watchful eye. But he was ready for that because he knew he would never allow himself to stray again. Yesterday, they had gone for a family walk in the city park and ran into Marcia's neighbor. Rick greeted her and was about to walk past, but the woman approached them and shared shocking news about Marcia that left Rick stunned. It turned out that Marcia was in prison for murdering her friend, and Sarah was living with her father, who turned out not to be her biological parent. After ending up in prison, Marcia began writing letters to her daughter, asking for forgiveness in every one of them, but Sarah refused to read any of them. Sarah now called her father's wife Mom, helped care for her little brother, and didn't want to remember her biological mother anymore. When they got home, Rick thought Sophie would start reproaching him again, reminding him of his affair with Marcia. But to his surprise, his wife didn't mention the woman he still remembered with dread. Rick, don't you want to get down on one knee again and propose to me? His wife's voice broke through his thoughts. Well, technically, his ex-wife's voice. Of course I do, Rick responded without hesitation. Then he stood up, went to the closet, and pulled out a small ring box. A week ago, he had received his quarterly bonus. He immediately stopped by a jewelry store and bought Sophie a stunning ring. Why wait? Everything at home was perfect, no arguments, no turmoil. The kids were happy. All that was missing for complete happiness was a wedding. I was planning to take you out for a romantic dinner tomorrow and propose, but you beat me to it. He got down on one knee and held out the ring box. He looked over at Dana, who was holding her little sister's hand, watching her parents with wide eyes. Sophie, will you marry me?